Oh, hello there. Welcome to a new month. It's a brand new month. It is March, and guess what? We're marching on. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. This is the AM Show. Welcome aboard. Now, coming up shortly, we're going to be serving you the news with everything in there, the latest tidbits. But then, shortly, or right after that, we'll be joined by political scientist and director of the Center for European Studies at the University of Ghana, Dr. Kwabi Asare-Asante. He will be our guest for the news review. But then we get into our big stories, and what an interesting package we have for you this morning. Guess what? Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has hinted that a planned high-level government delegation to China has been postponed to late March 2023. Yes, this month. Now, this is on the back of the upcoming National People's Congress of China meeting scheduled for early March. However, the finance minister said bilateral talks would continue ahead of this important mission. Government is seeking, under the G20 Common Framework for Debt Treatment, to get debt forgiveness from some bilateral and multilateral partners. And we're going to be discussing this in addition to government's quest to seek debt cancellation with China and those other entities. Joining us for that conversation, Professor Godfred Bokpin. He's a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Dr. Saad Idrisu is an economist, Louisiana Economic Development, and Isaac Kofi Ajay, my own colleague, data analyst here at JoyNews. He'll be joining the conversation as well. But we also have Dwight Mensah, economist and senior researcher, Institute of Fiscal Studies. All of them will be joining us for a conversation. Now, on Citizen's Microphone today, it's been a while, hasn't it? We spent some time on the Tema motorway. We'll be focusing on long vehicles parked along the stretch and how they are endangering other road users. Just today, I saw one en route, and it poses such a danger. Some of them are poorly lit and all of that. Least mistake, and you'll smash right into them, and your life could be gone. We'll be discussing that as well on the show. But today being a Wednesday, we've also got, yes, you guessed it, AM Business, courtesy of EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. Today, James Ashern interacts with former Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, Dr. Tony Obin, on how Ghana can leverage the discovery of lithium for economic growth. And then we tell you about the Blue Skies Fresh Pact Initiative. This is an industry research and development hub created by Blue Skies to find solutions to sustainability challenges. Now, the team has shortlisted 5 solutions with the potential of mitigating plastic pollution in Ghana. Just yesterday, we were talking about plastic. We'll bring you details of that later on the show. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. So share your thoughts with us, and let's get interactive on the AM Show. Up next, the news. If you're just joining us, welcome to the month of March. Time now for the news. And in our first story, 70-year-old veteran politician Bola Tinubu has been declared winner of Nigeria's presidential election. He obtained 36% of the votes cast to retain power for the governing All Progressives Congress. Now, his main rival, Atiku Abubakar, polled 29%, and Labour Party's Peter Obi, 25%. We hear from the elected president in a moment, but first, let's hear from the Nigerian Electoral Commission, the INEC.
That Tinubu Bola Ahmed of the APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Tinubu is promising to build a new Nigeria of prosperity.
Substitution and many ways. But Senator Yari, who was the former governor, Mutawali, the Excellency President Governor, Shetima, and many of them, including Senator Marafa, they got together on their own after so much pressure. They were able to resolve their differences without damaging to the party, without destroying the party, and they brought home victory for the presidential candidate and victory for the Senate. I want to say thank you especially for those. We will never forget Yari. We will never forget an Atiku, the sacrifice. We will never forget Mutawali. He's my son, actually. Now I can go straight before other wrappings and talks to what I should do. My standing out here is to talk to fellow Nigerians that I am profoundly humbled that you have elected me to serve as the 16th president of our beloved country. This is a shining moment in the life of any man and affirmation of our democratic existence. From my heart, and truly from my heart, I say thank you very much.
Well, from Nigeria, let's come back to Ghana, and President Akufo-Addo is confident Ghana will reach a final deal with the International Monetary Fund for a bailout at the end of this month following progressive talks with the China authorities for debt cancellation. According to him, a meeting with the Chinese Exim Bank is progressing positively, giving indication the country could seal a deal with the Paris Club. He was addressing the annual ambassadors and high commissioners get-together at the Pediasi Lodge last night.
We acknowledge the reality of the fact that our economy is in considerable difficulty. The budget drawn for the 2022 fiscal year was thrown out of gear, disrupting our balance of payments and debt sustainability, and further exposing the structural weaknesses of our economy. We have gone to the International Monetary Fund to repair in the short term our public finances and restore our balance of payments, while we continue to work on the medium to long-term structural changes that are at the heart of our goal of constructing a resilient, robust Ghanaian economy and building a Ghana beyond aid. Just as we managed to achieve a staff-level agreement with the fund in record time in December last year, whose terms we are systematically fulfilling, including the difficult but ultimately highly successful process of the domestic debt exchange program. I'm confident that with the cooperation we are receiving from members of the Paris Club and the People's Republic of China, which has sent a delegation from China's Exim Bank to Accra over the weekend to meet with officials of the Ministry of Finance, we shall be able to go to the board of the fund to conclude finally the agreement by the end of March. This will set the stage for the strong recovery of Ghana's economy. Needless to say, we would hope that all Ghana's friends would weigh in with words of support at the fund.
Now, after months of persistent calls by the then minority leader Haruna Idrisu, chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Jean Mensah, has finally appeared before Parliament to brief MPs on the Commission's proposed constitutional instrument. Now, the CI makes the Ghana card the sole identity document to enroll on the register. Jean Mensa mounted a spirited defense of the proposal, arguing it would rid Ghana's voters' register of minors and non-citizens. Parliamentary Affairs correspondent Kweku Asante now reports.
Former minority leader Haruna Idrisu had always insisted that EC chairperson Jean Mensa appears before the House over this controversial CI. Madam Jean Mensa says this CI will help make Ghanaian election even more credible as she mounted a spirited defense of the proposals.
The CI before Parliament seeks to promote the continuous registration of voters and advocates for an all-year-round registration of eligible voters at the district offices of the Electoral Commission. It is a clear departure from the previous system where the voters' registration was done for a limited period. We are mindful of Article 42, Article 42 of the Constitution, which enjoins us to register Ghanaians who are 18 years and above and who are of sound mind. We do not intend to disenfranchise persons who qualify to vote. More especially, it will prevent unqualified persons from influencing our elections and having a say as to who should govern our country. This is an issue that borders on the sovereignty of our nation. Simply put, only eligible Ghanaians must be entitled to vote. And we call on our honorable members to support our efforts to prevent foreigners and minors from getting onto our electoral roll, that the Ghana card will not be used to vote in the 2024 election. The Ghana card is only a requirement to register as a voter. Once you present your Ghana card and successfully register as a voter, you will be issued with a voter's identification card which bears the code of your region, your district, your electoral area, and the name of your polling station. The Ghana card does not have these features, and therefore it will not be used to vote in the 2024 general election.
The NIE, the institution dealing with the production of the Ghana cards, which is at the center of this controversy, are also of the opinion that the Ghana card will make the election even more credible. Professor Kenatifa is Executive Secretary of the NIE.
With respect to the integration of our database with EC, the hope is that it will help eliminate the cost of periodic voter register compilation, card issuance, and voter verification, depending on which of these options the EC will independently select to pursue. But it will also result in the issuance of secure ID smart cards with 10-year life cycles, if this were ever to be considered. But most importantly, it will eliminate concerns over voter fraud due to the high integrity of our database. There will be no duplication of voter ID and determination of eligibility based on age, based on citizenship, and also based on the person's identity, that you will be who you say you are.
Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has also been assuring Parliament that the NIA will get the requisite financial support to undertake more registrations and to clear its debt with the banks, which has led to the seizure of some 3.5 million cards.
To ensure that the 3.5 million cards will be released at the appropriate time for the work to be done, we agreed on 100 million CD transfer, and as he rightly said, 80 million has been put into the accounts of CAL, and 20 million, as he also mentioned, will be done by close of business today. So we are very comfortable about the situation to ensure that the needed cards will be given to the NIA to do its work.
MPs on both sides had questions, but some had comments on the presentation.
I want to believe that she traveled to Nigeria on a Ghanaian passport and not a Ghanaian national ID card. We need you to establish, and Mr. Speaker, we are demanding that this is established. We want technical evidence of data sharing infrastructure between the National Electoral Commission, the National Identification Authority, She says that 10 million people use Ghana card. It means that some 3.4 million use other references other than Ghana card, where their votes illegitimate and they did undermine our democracy. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Can you explain to us why the proposed CI is very important and how the CI will expose impersonators and fraudsters who don't have any form of identity?
Reporting for JoyNews, Kweku Asante, Parliament House, Accra.
Now, the NDC Member of Parliament for Jaman South in the Bono region, Williams Okofo-Datte, has been accused by the MPP of engaging in financial malfeasance and corrupt acts that are killing the developmental agenda of the municipality. At a media briefing in Drobo, the MPP alleged that funds earmarked for the support of educational infrastructure and the vulnerable, among others, are being misapplied against the law. They are appealing to stakeholders to act in the interest of the people in the constituency. Precious Semevo has more.
Seen as development agents at the constituency level, members of parliament are expected to use their share of funds, including the District Assembly Common Fund and Social Intervention Fund, among others, to support pro-poor development activities in their communities. But according to the NPP in the German South, their NDC NP, Williams Okofo-Datte, is doing the opposite. At a press conference in Drobo, they accused Okofo-Datte of colliding with suppliers to divert funds meant for the vulnerable and school buildings at Enunkrano, Mirimano, and other communities against the laws, thereby depriving the people of the expected benefit. Techi Hayford is the German South Constituency Deputy Organizer of the MPP.
Honorable Williams Okofo-Datte has taken some huge sums of money to procure 600 bags of cement and 20 trips of sand to construct classroom blocks for the people of Enunkrano. But our checks from his side indicate that after almost 2 years of taking the money, only 1,200 blocks have been modeled. When you go to Enunkrano, the Member of Parliament also promised to give them some bags of cement, sand, and the rest. Out of the money and the quantum that estimated to be given for this project, only 1,002 of blocks has been given. Our checks also indicate that the price that he gave in relation to purchase for cement and other things, it was inflated to the tune of 15%. Honorable Member of Parliament for German South has not been truthful in financial dealings.
Providing further details, the Constituency Secretary, Samuel Obintechi, explained how a football gala with funds from the social intervention ended abruptly with all prize monies unaccounted for.
He took 60,000 of taxpayers' money from the social intervention fund to organize football gala. The division is that the winner will take 10,000, the first runner-up will take 7,000 in that order, and the prize money amounts to 20,000, and he's using 40,000 to organize. They intentionally created some scenes and came to tell us that for security reasons they could not finish the games. As we speak, that amount has been squandered. Nobody knows where it is.
German South Municipal Chief Executive Andrews Bediako, when contacted, corroborated the accusations and said he has taken steps to ensure the people get what is due them, including an investigation by the state bodies.
Last year, you took money that you were going to buy a Christmas gift for vulnerable within the municipality. You ended up sharing these items to your party people, constituency secretary, constituency chairman, constituency youth organizer. So this year, when they wanted to assess this, I told them, without the last year's distribution list, I'm not going to approve this for you. Lo and behold, when they were able to bring this, I said, okay, let's look at it. This year, what we gave to them, it is worse. Going forward, I've written to education director, I've written to health director. Those things that came to me, for that one I have control. But assessing this health fund, SIF, get fund from education director and the health director, they cannot make any payment without my knowledge. Because if we do it, I will let the NIB come in to investigate. Even this issue, I'm going to let him investigate it.
Precious Semevo, JoyNews, Drobo.
Let's turn our gaze to health now, and malnutrition among children under 2 years, which has sometimes led to their deaths in some parts of the country, has been curtailed due to an intervention by the World Vision, which assisted households with adequate feeding supplements, especially for both mother and child. The intervention, dubbed Improved Feeding Practices for First 1,000 Days, provides proper dietary needs to the pregnant mother through delivery till the child is 2 years old. Beneficiaries of the project tell JoyNews' Hannah Odame in their report their source of livelihood has been positively impacted.
Prior to the implementation of the project in the selected districts of the 3 regions, some mothers were not exclusively breastfeeding their children in the first 6 months of their lives. Others did not wean off the children with the appropriate meals. All these affected the general well-being and developmental milestones of the child. Hagar Idubampong, who had 2 children before encountering the new feeding methods, testified of how it saved her from complicated childbirth.
World Vision gave us poultry and supplementary food to enhance our diet and health. I realized I had no complications during my pregnancy, as doctors told me my health was always improving anytime I visited the hospital. My child is also doing very well at her birth.
Project manager of the Improved Feeding Program, Priscilla Babie, shared how the project exceeded its targets in getting mother and child the right meals.
I have trained village-based entrepreneurs on how to promote the sales of nutritional supplements. Again, we have also provided startup crop to our farmers. So we have 1,056 farmers that we are working across the project location. Now, these startup crops include orange flesh sweet potato, which is biofortified crop rich in vitamin A. So we are promoting the consumption of this crop, which is rich in vitamin A, which is also an essential micronutrient that children need to boost their growth. Again, we have also supported them with pawpaw seedlings, mango seedlings, and moringa seedlings that are being cultivated at the household level for consumption.
Male champions who were enrolled to assist with the implementation of the project talked about how they supported the women.
At first, I think the care of the child is in the hands of the woman. But due to the training I've been through, I know it is a collective effort. I have to do it with the lady so that we can get the proper upbringing of the child.
World Vision says it will extend the project, financed by the Japan Social Development Fund, to other regions in the country. For JoyNews, I am Hannah Odame.
Thank you for staying with us for the news. The news review is up next. Do stay. Here we go with the newspapers. Time now for the news review, and we're joined by Dr. Kwame Asasanti, political scientist and director of the Center for European Studies at the University of Ghana. Mind you, the news review is brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. We're telling you a bit more about them shortly, but let's get into the papers now. And we have the Ghanaian Times Daily Guide, the Finder, the Ghanaian Publisher. We also have the Chronicle and a few other papers. If time permits it, we'll get into all of them. Doc, good morning. Mache, that's I said, and then I'll pay. Why agree so on the Emetrian Como? Sometimes I feel like speaking something apart from English. Anyway, so we get into it. I hope you're well, though. I hope you've been doing well.
I'm good.
Last time we spoke, I think you had, is it exams or some papers to mark or something of the sort?
No, I had a lecture.
You had a lecture.
I was supposed to go for a lecture. Yeah.
Right. So we start with the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Big boost from mining sector. Ghana attracts 3 gold, 1 lithium mining firms. Poised to begin operations by end of year in Ahafo, Upper, East, West and Central regions. There's also Aveno fire outbreak renders 600 homeless, destroys 450 wooden structures and metal containers. There's also on the Ghana Carter sole ID for voter registration. New CI won't disenfranchise any Ghanaian, EC chair assures. President receives credential letters or letters of credence from 5 envoys, and then court orders legal aid to provide lawyer for alleged coup plotter. Let's start with the story on page 4, and then we'll move on to other pages. So, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Jean Adukwe Mensah, has assured members of Parliament that the proposed constitutional instrument, which seeks to make the Ghana card the sole identity card for the purpose of registration as a voter, will not disenfranchise Ghanaians. In a presentation to Parliament's Committee of the Whole in Accra yesterday, Mrs. Mensah said the proposed CI would rather enhance the credibility of the Ghanaian voter register, engender confidence in the electoral process, and make the registration of voters a continuous one. Quoting her, she says, "I wish to emphasize that this CI and its provisions are not aimed at disenfranchising eligible Ghanaians. The continuous registration process will be inclusive. It will make it possible to capture all those who would otherwise have been excluded in a limited registration process." Doc, on the back of what we've seen in Nigeria, the complaints about, the biometric system that they wanted to implement, which at a point, was fraught with its own problems. And then we are looking at a Ghana card, which all of those who would want to vote or would qualify to vote or do qualify now to vote do not have. Some have said, good to go ahead with this, but can you ensure that everyone who must have the Ghana card to be able to register will be able to do so? That is the question. Are we there yet? Are we ready? Especially considering that the NIA has a huge debt, which they've not been able to meet, for which reason some of their cards have been seized and all of that. Where do you stand on this? And has she given you enough of an assurance?
I think it's a legitimate question you are asking, and it's very crucial for our forward march into a democracy that we have. If you look at the arguments, I'm tempted to believe that from the goings on in Parliament yesterday, where Professor Kenneth Atifa said that he has received information that the money that they needed to pay for something has been received. I want to believe that it is the money meant for that those cards that have been seized, so that they can take care of that. Interestingly, Professor Atifa has also made us to believe that they can do the registration for the rest of the people, I think 2.5 million, within 11 days or so. If that is anything to go by, then it's a refreshing news, and we can go for that. But he's a man I trust his word, so I want to believe that if giving the resources, he will be able to deliver. If that is the case, then I want government to begin by now, pay all the necessary funds that we need for Professor Atifa to begin work, so that by the time we get to, say, somewhere August, September, we should be done with that exercise, so that there will be a mop-up exercise that we can, confidently say that we have done the registration, everybody has a card, we have done a mop-up, so that in case somebody turns a new year and then enters into the voting age, he can be covered and all that. Once we get that process going, I think we can be sure that we are not going to suffer problems come 2024. But if we are not able to do that all within this year, then I feel that we need to look at it and look at it again. It is a good thing to have a digitized system, but it is not enough to just have it. But it should work, especially on the day of election. We've seen the experience in Nigeria that on the day of election, they can't even upload results. The BVDs are not working, and the rest of them. I think that Ghana will take serious lessons from this and learn well, so that this year, we should be able to cross our T's and dot our I's, and then get ourselves battle ready for the tax ahead for 2024. I believe if we're able to do this within this year, I think I can raise my chest high and then tell myself that we are confident for 2024.
Well, let's get into some other stories. I'll just touch and go on this. President receives credential letters of 5 envoys. I'm talking about the Canadian High Commissioner. There's also the one from Mauritius, then Guinea, then Bangladesh, and New Zealand. The president has received their letters from all the representatives of these 5 countries. Normal processes in diplomatic circles. But let's focus on the stories on page 11. Big boost from mining sector. Ghana attracts 3 gold, 1 lithium mining firms poised to begin operations by end of year at Ahafo, Upper East, West, and Central regions. Now, a total of 4 new large-scale mining companies are expected to start operations in the country within the next 24 hours. The Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Mr. Samuel Abu-Jinapor, has announced. According to him, the new mines will comprise 3 gold mining firms and 1 lithium mining company and would boost the country's mining receipts as well as create new employment opportunities for the youth. Mr. Jinapor disclosed this in Accra yesterday when he took his turn at the weekly ministers' briefing organized by the Ministry of Information. I look at the figures, Doc, over the years, how much we've secured from our mining exploits, whether it is gold, bauxite, diamonds, manganese, and all of that. And all this talk about lithium is cheap for me, especially for young people. Our gold is finite. I always say these resources are finite. Have we ever contemplated 30 years, 40 years, 50 years from now? Some research pieces that I have seen tell us that in 50 years, our gold reserves will be something very far from what we're seeing now. So what we're exploiting must be put to the best use for future generations, because some generations to come will not come and meet the sort of resources we have, but they will still have to deal with global warming, climate change, and all the other, global situations that we are facing. So when I see these, we seem to have this, we're going to get more. But really, how much have we got from these deals? Sometimes you look at the royalties, 3%, 5%, 7%, 10%, while other countries are getting 35%, 50% right here in Africa. Your take, Doc?
Yes, I think you have hit the nail right on the head. It is also a worry for me because, one, we get excited when we see figures like this, we see stories like this, that, we're going to make it. But is that the case? We have seen mining in this country time and again, but we have benefited very little from it. One is because we are not thinking of how we can add value. You can't just be selling raw commodity to the manufacturer elsewhere. Begin to think about how you add value. That is the way to go, and that is what is missing. So every time we talk about we getting new companies coming in, my question is that when can we get our own people to add value to the gold that we get from the soil? That's one thing. And then you also touch on a very important thing, that the contract that we sign in this regard, sometimes you realize that we just give it out to those who are coming to mine here. And we, who are supposed to be the beneficiary of what God has endowed us with, we lose out in the end. Then the contract doesn't help us. You get very little and they get more and take it away. I think our scholars, especially legal brains in that regard, must look at that and help us in this regard. And then the issue of, yes, we are excited that we are getting people to come and mine, but we are also still being confronted with the problem of what? Galamsey. We are destroying water bodies, we are destroying farmlands, we are destroying the ecosystem in general. And there is very little government is doing in that regard. All that government is interested in welcoming, investors like this and all that. But we want government to turn its attention to maintaining the environment, salvaging the environment, because there's no point we getting all the resources and we come back to battle with health issues, battle with environmental issues, then everything comes to naught. So I think all in all, they must reflect on all these things seriously and begin to chart a new path. We should have a paradigm shift as not only welcoming investors, but that we force them to do the needful. And that when they cross the line, we should not hesitate to throw them away if that is the rules regarding the game. all right? Once we do that, then we can be sure that we'll be able to maximize the use of such resources and then employ them into the sectors that we need the most in our society.
Let's also look at the story. Heartbreaking. Aveno fire outbreak renders 600 homeless. Also on page 11, destroys 450 wooden structures and metal containers. And at least 600 people have been displaced following a fire outbreak at Aveno Market near the Kwame Nkrumah interchange in Accra Tuesday dawn. This is just yesterday. The inferno also destroyed 450 wooden structures, metal containers used for commercial and domestic purposes. No casualty was recorded. That's the good thing. When Ghanaian Times got to the scene at about 8:30 a.m., victims were at the scene salvaging some items left after the damage. Others were also gathered in small numbers, brooding over the misfortune, with others in shock and discussing the tragedy. Now, despite the sad situation for many, it was a field day for scrap dealers as they searched through the debris for metal. Some of the victims who spoke to the Ghanaian Times said they suspected the fire might have been caused by an electrical fault. A victim identified as Sule Mokhtari said their personal effects and wares had been completely destroyed by the fire and appealed to government to support them. Let's hear from the fire service as well. The Public Relations Officer of the Accra Regional Fire Command, Assistant Divisional Officer Grade 1, Louis Kwabena Pakfu said the command's firefighters were deployed to the scene immediately they received the distress call. He said fire tenders were deployed from the Kwame Nkrumah Interchange National Headquarters at Bilinkpe and the Accra Regional Headquarters, and that the fire was brought under control at 3:21 a.m. and extinguished at 4:15 a.m. Unfortunately, they couldn't salvage, a whole lot. 450 wooden structures. We know how, if you've been to Aveno, and metal containers, all of them razed to the ground. The only good thing, like I keep saying, no one perished. But it gives us food for thought in terms of what we're doing in housing the masses in this country, the poorest of the poor. We don't have those social systems to cater for them when they're on the streets. We will not provide for them in terms of housing them. We've had so many, what do they even call those projects? Affordable housing projects that have come to nothing. And people live like this. And now, with this happening, 450 wooden structures and metal containers, you can multiply that by about 5 in terms of occupancy. That should give you an idea of how many people would be involved. You'd be reaching something around 2,400 people. Where will they go? What happens to them? Will they add to the numbers on the streets? Will that be even more of a security threat for us as a people? Your take, Doc.
Yes, Ben, my worry over the years is that we as voters, we sometimes shy away from the very important things that we need. All right, these are the things that we have to force politicians to put into their manifesto so that you can, hold them to it. That let us have a facility for what? The poor, the needy, and the vulnerable. You may start a pilot project so that you have a few people in there, and gradually we build on that. This thing is missing. When people are going to vote, they are looking for goodies. Very few things, thrown to them, they are happy. And then we forget about very important things that affect us. I believe that going forward, we should look at some of these things, force political parties to put into their manifesto so that we can ensure that they will implement them. Let's have places where the needy, the vulnerable can be there. And then we build on. The aged, all right, we begin to think about them. The second issue is issue of planning. Do we have planners in this country, or they are on sabbatical leave? Sometimes I ask myself, because you have all manner of unauthorized, structures along certain lines and certain places and all that. And it seems to me that nobody cares a hoot about their existence. And whenever there is trouble, then we begin to go there, and all that. If we are doing proper planning here, any structure you put at any place, you require the proper, permit to do that, so that we don't, get these occurrences, many times. I think planning must also go in, and then education. People must be educated that look, how you keep fire in some of these places will go a long way to affect you and I. So constant education. I am happy that. Gradually, the fire service, they've been giving us snipers of information about fire safety and the rest of them. But we want them to intensify their program so that we'll get more education and save people. Then the insensitivity on the part of people. Anytime there is accident, you see people rushing there to go and loot and go and pick things that belong to the affected and then the needy people and all that. You see even accidents. Instead of saving people, people rush there, go and search through people's bags and all that. These things must be a thing of the past. It is even a sorry story, to say the least. We don't have to engage in that. We sympathize with those who are affected, and then we support them any way possible.
Let's get into the Daily Guide newspaper now. Ghana raked $6.6 billion from gold, and another interesting bit there. Oftentimes you would hear us say, oh, this is how much we've got from gold within this period. And you would see other countries reporting, this is how much we imported from Ghana in terms of gold. And that sum would be even far more than, we are claiming per our official records. This is sometimes I just look at Ghana and wonder, we're a very curious bunch, very curious. Some of the wording I want to use this morning may not be appropriate. So I'm just saying we're a very curious bunch, very interesting bunch of people. We have everything, yet we have nothing. And we keep electing people who also add practically nothing to our lives. And we're so passionate about them. I saw a joke. It's an image recently. And sheep were going to vote. They were voting. One line was voting for a wolf, and the other was voting for a lion. In other words, they are just voting for who eats them. In the end, the value is the same. Interesting bunch. Anyway, gang busted for stealing Lands Commission's 100 million Ghana cedis. Then there's Health Minister dodges Parliament. And there's Mahama begins 2024 campaign. Ghana card to prevent foreigners from voting. Let's get into those stories quickly. I'll take a few of them. And Ghana recorded $6.6 billion in revenue from gold in 2022, making the mining sector the leading source of export revenue for the country. The Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Samuel Abu-Jinapor, who announced this at the Ministry of Information's Meets the Press series yesterday, said following that significant investment in exploration, 4 new large-scale mining operations would also start production in the next 2 years. We've already told you about those 4. There's also Ghana card to prevent foreigners from voting. Interesting comments there. That's according to the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. And that also, let me just bring this in. She made this comment, passed this comment yesterday. The Ghana card won't be used to vote in 2024 election. You can check that on JoyNews on Facebook. That's according to Jean Mensah. Of course, it's the registration process. So to register for the ongoing registration, you would require the Ghana card. But the Ghana card itself won't be used to vote. Health Minister dodges Parliament. And yesterday he was given 2 hours to appear in Parliament. And he failed to do so, to answer critical questions. And Mahama has begun his 2024 campaign as well. And former President Mahama has announced that he will officially launch his campaign in his bid to lead the NDC into the 2024 general elections on Thursday, March the 2nd, 2023, which is tomorrow. Quick takes on these stories?
Yeah, I will look at the NIA card that is not going to, they are not going to use, get a new one, and then we are going to maintain what we have, and then there's a continuous registration. I think I welcome that, because if you look at advanced democracies such as Denmark, that is what they have, and other jurisdictions, that as soon as you have an important document like that, now you continue to add to it, so that the child is born and quickly the name is in. By the time he gets to the voting age, is already there, so that the trouble that always, affect us when we are going to vote, we need to go and register. There's trouble, legal battles, and all that will be a thing of the past. So once we have a very perfect or a very good document, let me put it this way, a very good document that will stand the test of time, let's continue to add, but we'll make sure that the names that go in are the best. There are a lot of security measures that I must commend the NIA for having introduced, so that anybody who wants to be funny and want to throw something illegal in, you risk having your fingers bent with regards to what the laws of the land. So I think we need to jealously guard this process and make it work. All that I'm asking for is that government will release the appropriate resources for NIA people to do their work, and then the process will also go on to get the grounds ready for the battle of 2024. Let me move on to another important thing, which is Mahama's campaign. Mahama has started his campaign, and I think it's a good thing. Now he's going to, scan the whole system, and then the pre-election phase, he wants to do the needful by, picking information. This is time to pick information and strategize, and then begin to identify the problems of this country, and then you begin to prepare towards a manifesto development, and you begin to have a strategy for campaign, message development, and all that. It's a whole lot of exercise. And I know, having been on the seat before president, he has seen it all. So I'm sure his team is ready to put resources together. It's my hope and prayer that all these things that we are doing in terms of campaign and all that, it will be incident-free, and that we'll be able to throw out messages that resonate with the people, and then make sure that the people get the best from what campaigns are all about. That is all that we are asking from Mr. Mahama and his team.
Right. In other stories, Macaroni alleges death threats. A Nigerian content creator and activist, Adebowale Debo Adedayo, popularly known as Mr. Macaroni, has revealed the death threat he received over his involvement in Nigeria's February 25 election. According to him, he tweeted a screenshot of the death threat sent to him via his email, which stated that he should thank God if he survives this year. We have some prominent, people, actors, actresses, and others also competing in that election. There's also India Commission launches Year of Millet, and according to the High Commissioner, the consumption and production of millet has a greater potential of alleviating poverty and food shortage in deprived countries in the global south. Those are two interesting stories there to cap it off. Do you have any reactions, or should we move on to the Finder newspaper?
I think we can go on to the Finder newspaper.
Right.
Yeah.
So 100 million Ghana cedis released to NIA to clear part of its debt to creditors. And the finance minister yesterday in Parliament gave us a bit of a briefing on some of these matters. Interesting that we had to wait till there was talk of it. The NIA boss had to come out and say that, look, we owe this much, and so we are not even able to proceed with card printing. Let's get into that story. The other story there is from the Lands and Natural Resources Minister, which we've already looked at. So government has released 100 million Ghana cedis to the National Identification Authority as the first tranche of payments to clear debts owed creditors. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, who disclosed this in Parliament, explained that 80 million Ghana cedis was paid first and 20 million Ghana cedis was paid yesterday. According to him, government had reached an agreement with Cowbank on timelines to clear the debt NIA owes its creditors. The Finder has learned that NIA owes suppliers and bankers that has been negotiated with all creditors amounts to about $117 million, not cedis. The Electoral Commission and the NIA briefed Parliament on their readiness to implement proposed constitutional instruments ahead of the 2024 polls as well. What do you make of this? I mean, the rest of the story touches on reducing the usual pressure at registration centers by using the Ghana card, that the Ghana card will not replace the voter identification or voter ID, and that there will be no new register, and the 17.3 million registered and the 2.5 million left to be registered. All of that was spoken of. But what do you make of the fact that the NIA, which is overseeing the rollout of the Ghana card, owes to the tune of $117 million. We're talking about 100 million cedis. That is a drop in a bucket. Your take?
It's unfortunate that an important exercise like this, that we have tasked the gentleman to do, we are not ready to support him with resources to carry out. And yet we get the courage to attack him, that he has not delivered, there is a problem and all that. That's unfair. all right? It is when you've given him resources and he's not able to deliver. On the back of that, then you can chastise him or take a swipe at him. But that said, I think that we need to be serious about what is important for us. Election is so critical, and it's you and I know its effect on the stability of the country and all that. So we expect that whatever we do, we need to be able to marshal resources to support any effort at making elections work. Because as Professor Jimabwedi wrote in one of his work, there's a cost for doing nothing, and we don't want to get closer to that. So all that we need to do is to apply our resources very efficiently. We know what is in the best interest of us. We push in resources, and then we do. Every time people who have been given the mandate to do some of these things, when they are out shouting, crying, canvassing for resources, it becomes problematic. You ask yourself whether those who employ them are ready to finance them to do their work. Recently, you heard the OSP that he is office to resources he doesn't have and all that. This thing must cease in this country because we have resources, except that with the judicious use of resources is our problem. And I don't see why it should be a problem if we get our priorities right.
Just quickly on this, be circumspect in dealing with land issues, as Santahene warns chiefs. He's actually had to basically wrench some land from the Amakom Hene and give it to an individual. And he was addressing the Bantama Hene Bafo Wusu Amankwetia the 6th and Amakom Hene Nanaedu Mensah Asare, who have recently been summoned by the Asante Hene for embroiling themselves in some land sale controversy. So Otumfuo having to intervene in there. Then U.S. Embassy equips media with tools to enhance accountable governance. I'm talking about the Ghana News Agency, the New Times Corporation, the Graphic Communications Group Limited, Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, the Fourth Estate, that is the Media Foundation for West Africa, Corruption Watch Center for Democratic Development, and the National Media Commission. All of them got laptops from the U.S. Embassy. Those stories in there. Any quick reactions as we get ready to wrap? Hello, Doc.
The U.S. support for development of media program in this country, I support and I commend them. U.S. is one of the partners in this industry who have, giving continuous support for journalism work in this country. It's very good. We thank them. A few years ago, the Germans were doing that, taking people for training, even in Germany and the rest of them. All right. So I believe that other embassies will also emulate same and support the media to grow. You and I know that without development of the media and democratic, institutions like that, our democracy will not go anywhere. But that we also have to be responsible in the maintaining whatever they give to us so that we can ensure value for money. That is the way to go. That's the way to go.
Let's take a look at the Ghanaian publisher. Gold export raised in 6.6 billion. We've already looked at that. Ghana card, not voter ID card substitute. That's according to the EC. And then MPs mad, angry over vaccine shortage. I'm sure recently you've heard those vaccines for children, for rubella, polio, and the rest that were in short supply. And guess what? The health minister was invited to Parliament and he failed to show up. And it wouldn't be the first time. Yesterday, he was given 2 hours to appear and he simply didn't show up. I have said in sharing some of my blunt thoughts that any country that has a health minister who would wait for there to be a shortage in these crucial, children are the most vulnerable in any society. In some places, 2 months, it's been in short supply. What happens to those children who need these vaccines? In any proper jurisdiction, that minister would have resigned. But we've seen the COVID wahala, we've seen this, and this person is still opposed. Any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's becoming one too many on the part of, those who manage the health needs of our people, all right? It's not a good thing because, as you rightly said, children are the most vulnerable and the most precious that we need to protect at all times. We have signed the Children's Act into law and that we will give them support all the time. All right, let us demonstrate that what we are put in the Constitution is what we are doing on the ground by supporting them and all that. And all boils down to the fact that there is poor planning. We don't plan properly, and then we are taking, by events. We are taken by events. And when it happens like that, we blame it on any other thing apart from we ourselves, what we have done. But I think we must up our game in this regard.
Doc, thank you so much for your time. But before we go, on the BBC, I just spied this. Greece train crash. Survivors describe nightmarish seconds. And at least 32 people have died and dozens more were injured in the head-on collision between two trains near the city of Larissa on Tuesday night. Rescuers have been working through the night to find survivors. According to one Stergios Minenis, we heard a big bang, said 28-year-old passenger Stergios Minenis, who jumped to safety from the wreckage. For 10-15 seconds, it was chaos, tumbling over, fires, cables hanging, broken windows, people screaming, people trapped. That must have been horrific, and we commiserate with them. 32 people losing their lives in Greece. Just a few seconds reflection on that.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and we commiserate with them. It's unfortunate that it has happened. We know they'll put structures in place so that we don't have a recurrence of that. But I'm surprised that all the newspapers shy away from Nigerian election, which is very
I made mention of a bit of it, I think, at some point. But maybe just your final thoughts then. Bola Tinubu, 70-year-old. People have spoken about how we have all these very old people at the helm of affairs in Africa. Compared to the West, look at their averagely 30-something, 40-something, 50, Here we seem to be going a certain route. And with all the problems that have mired these elections, in some 30 seconds, quick thoughts, since you brought it up.
If you look, I want to look at the election. I realized that there were problems in the pre-election phase. Issue of delay in voting as a result of lack of materials at the right time. And then issue of violence that characterized some of the places. We also saw issue of corruption in some of the places as well. But on the day of election and beyond that, the interesting thing is that one would have thought that you would see ethnicity playing a role in Nigeria, because Nigeria, take it or leave it, is divided along 3 ethnic lines: the Hausa North, the Yoruba and Igbo South, and all that. And if you see the permutation of the flag bearers and their running mates, one would have thought that we'll have some ethnic dimension, but it did not work. It did not work. And interestingly, one would have also expected APC to lose the election. For me, because if you look at Boko Haram insurgents, issue of kidnapping, issue of poor economy, rising inflation, and unemployment. And against the fact that you have about 43% of the youth who are unemployed, one would have thought that the scale would tilt for PDP. Because in Nigeria, take it or leave it, people were rooting for Obi, but I knew that he was not going to win because the country was naturally party system, and that the two parties are entrenched, that any other third force will not be recognized, even though I recognize that you have about 166 million youth who were ready to vote and all that. But as to whether they cast their vote for APC was another thing. But we commend Nigeria. My prayer is that after election, all right, whatever differences that they have, they should go to court and seek redress than resorting to violence and undermine democracy in Nigeria, in Africa.
Brilliant points you've made. Thank you so much, Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, for joining the conversation. He is a political scientist and the director of the Center for European Studies at the University of Ghana. Before we go into sports, this segment is brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, and we are offering free prostate screening and free female fertility screening. Locators in Accra Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard, in Kumasi Kronomabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex, Takrade Anaji Estate, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa, and Esiama Enzima. You can reach us on 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. Up next on the AM show, we serve you sports. Do stay.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to AM Sports here with me, Muftau Nabila Abdullah. The local organizing committee for Africa Games 2023, they have officially announced the new date for the organization of the games. You would recall that Joy Sports reported that the games were going to be postponed, which indeed came to pass. And we also mentioned that there was a possibility the games was going to be staged between April and May. However, the local organizing committee, in conjunction with the Africa Union, have announced that the competition will rather start on the 8th of March and end on March 23. We hear from Dr. Decius Chipande, who represents the African Union and made the announcement on Tuesday night.
Following the negotiated agreement on the unity, on the tripartite approach in terms of organized success, the great efforts, and we have been assured by the Ministry of Sports and will be fully ready to even following also in agreement with the dates that have been proposed by the Republic of Ghana, and the closing ceremony will be on the 23rd of March 2024. 23 will be held from 8th March 2024 to 23rd March 2024. And on behalf of Her Excellency, Commissioner for Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development, Her Excellency Ambassador Minata Samate Sesuma, the African Union Commission would like to call upon all stakeholders that include African Union member states, sports confederations, sports councils, associations, African Olympic committees, councils, and all potential partners and stakeholders to support the Republic of Ghana towards the hosting of very, very successful African Games in 2024.
We hear from the local organizing committee chairman, Dr. Ofosu Asare, who revealed the decision that influenced their choice of choosing March 8th and for the start of the competition.
Athletes and officials will be arriving from the 5th to 7th. So 5th, 6th, 7th. The interesting aspect also is that 6th of March is our Independence Day. And we want to give them the opportunity also to have a feel of how we celebrate our Independence Day. This year we are 66 years. So in 2024 will be 67. And don't forget that Vice President Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was one of the founding fathers of the African Games. So it will be very interesting to see how our brothers will be joining us to celebrate our independence. You remember he said the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it's linked to the total liberation of Africa. So it's an opportunity for us to bring the entire Africans together. And one of the key objectives of the African Games is unity. And another key pillar is peace. And if you consider what is going on the continent, it will be a very good opportunity for us to promote peace, unity, solidarity, brotherliness, and to ensure that we create a very, very important opportunity for the youth and for the growth and development of Africa.
We move to a never-ending story now, and that has to do with the new Edibiase Stadium. This story has been running for the past 7 years. Government or successive governments have failed to put up the structure, and now the Minister of Youth and Sport, Mustafa Yusuf, has announced that the contract will be handed to a new contractor because the person who currently holds the contract has abandoned the job. And he says that it is important for government to put together the structure, and his office is committed to ensuring that by the time they exit office, the facility would be ready.
The new project for the construction of sports stadium started smoothly, but ran into challenges and has remained same for a couple of years. The project faced engineering challenges and was redesigned, packaged and contracted to Masses Shagdem Company Limited. The contractor started NS but abandoned sites for the past 2 years. All attempts aimed at ensuring that the contractor return to site fails. Mr. Speaker, all these unfortunate events happened during the Ministry of Youth and Sports consistently honoring the obligation by paying all the interim certificates, and that's the IPC submitted by the contractor. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, we had no option than to terminate the contract, and the project will be repackaged and awarded to a new contractor. Yes, the contractor had challenge, and in contract process, it's not just as easy just terminating. You need to go through certain process. You have to give the contractor warning for not getting to site. You need to make sure that the consultant assess the work done, and when all this fails, that is where you terminate. So we needed to go through the process of ensuring that we give the contractor a fair opportunity, and that is why it has taken time. But like I said here, finally we have terminated the contract, and we are in the process of repackaging it and awarding it to a new contractor to come to site and complete the project for the good use of the people of New Edubiasi.
Let's talk about Ghana Premier League now. And this season, there have been concerns surrounding the low patronage of Ghana Premier League matches. Well, the Chief Executive Officer of Dreams FC, Aminu Shado, says that supporters must be made to feel a part of the product.
Fan interaction and mobilization. Fantastic. It's very key. We need to also devote resources into nurturing your support base. Very, very key. And one way, supporters, in fact, I'm picking so many lessons because I had a shock of my life. Because I came for FA Cup, I say football, but when you go into the communities, in fact, people almost supported Division 2 clubs even more than Premier League clubs. Because Division 2 is within their community and they feel part of it. Until we can replicate it at the highest level, we should bring the fans and supporters close to the club, open a club up, let them be part of it. Once they feel a part of it, a obligation on every match day, they have to go to it. So that's what happens everywhere in the world. They feel obligated on match day, say, can support it because they feel part and parcel of the football club. And one thing now, we share most of stadiums now, supporter participation high. We share more engagement with our supporters. It was fun investment. And I knew it was investment. And constant engagement. The results on the field of play. Fantastic.
Well, now let's talk about yesterday. I was asked a question. Whether there is a sector in Ghana which is doing well. That is a major question, because if you take a look at almost every single sector in the country, there are question marks attached. Well, Joy Sports has rolled out what we describe as bush resource centers. This follows government decision to put together multi-purpose youth resource centers across the country. The then Minister of Youth and Sports, Isaac Esiama, had said that they were going to construct multi-purpose youth facilities across the 10 regions of Ghana. They started at the Azuma Nelson Youth Resource Center, just next to us here. That is a Kaneshi Sports Complex. Well, just because of 400,000 Ghana cedis, take a look at what the facility has become.
This is the Azuma Nelson Sports Youth Resource Center, named after legendary Ghanaian boxer Azuma Nelson. The facility was supposed to serve as a multi-purpose sports center, fit enough to accommodate more than 40 different sporting disciplines when completed. also known as the Kaneshi Sports Complex, the facility was built during the era of the Supreme Military Council and the General Achampong in the 1970s. It served as a training base for teams during AFCON 1978, which Ghana hosted and won. Since then, however, years of neglect had placed on the back burner the plans of the people running sports in the country. Various governments had made promises to upgrade the facility to its stature as a functioning multi-purpose sports center, but none had made good on their promises. But in March 2018, then Sports Minister Isaac Esiama finally commissioned renovation works to start on the facility.
We are securing the future of Ghana sports through this investment. And I can tell you, in the next 20 years, Ghanaians will remember one person called President Akufo-Addo for the huge investment he made in sports. This huge one. Across the country, we are going to do all these things. By November, you will see 10 multi-purpose youth centers. That can take off about 5,000 people. Sitting capacity 5,000. So we can even play some of the national matches. Understand? Yes, big matches. Black Queens can come and play maybe in Wa, because we're going to do one in Wa. They can go to Navrongo. Going to do one in Navrongo. They can go to Nehini. Going to do one in Nehini. So it's going to be across the country, spread across the country, so that everywhere you go, you have quality, modern sporting facility.
That was former Sports Minister Isaac Esiama in March 2018. It was supposed to be the dawn of a new era for sports infrastructure in the country. When completed, it was supposed to seat up to 5,000 people with a swimming pool and all kinds of adjoining facilities, including a running track to go with. And it was supposed to cost some $4 million and just 9 months to complete.
Each contractor has 9 months to complete the project. If we factor in the rainy season, it depends on the intensity of rain. It could go up to 11 or 12 months, not more.
But nearly 5 years later, this is the state of the project. In December of 2021, the new Sports Minister Mustafa Yusuf stated that the project was 90% complete.
If we are going to be able to identify talent in the various regions or our various communities, we can't do that without these facilities being completed. So government is committed, especially when we have already invested so much in these facilities. We can't abandon. And it's the same government. Government is continuous. And so the assurance can be getting from me. What I've realized that it was in phases. So we have phase 1, phase 2. So currently, I've engaged the consultant working on it and also the National Youth Authority, which is the agency that supervises those projects. So I can give you assurance that yes, those facilities will be completed on time, so that the identification of talent in the various regions where we have this facility, we can use those as a center. Even as one Nelson Sports Complex, Kaneshi Sports Complex can also even be used during the games.
Of course.
People can go there and compete, especially on football. It's media standard. So it's something that we are working on, and to ensure that we get it done. Some of them were 90%, 70%, and 80%. There are various stages of completion.
And he wasn't wrong, because at the time, the stunts were done. The pitch was done. It was looking green and lush. But barely a year later, this is the state of it. Abandoned and left to become a breeding ground for all kinds of reptiles. The Azuma Nelson Sports Complex is not befitting of the legend it's named after. In its current state, only animals can play sport here. At the time of abandonment, the project was indeed close to completion. With the VIP stand constructed and roofed, the 4 stands constructed and the seats fixed. The drainage system had also been done, and the groundswork had been prepared for the Titan tracks to be laid. All of that, however, has now been left to rot. The compound is bordered by walls of weeds, and the facility, in totality, has now become a breeding ground for reptiles, which have made here a happy home. Dammers and moles have eaten the white paint-coated goalposts, giving them an unpleasant look of distress. The football pitch is strangled by weeds, with the VIP stand divided by a risky pit. The renovation of the Azuma Nelson Sports Complex also known as the Kaneshi Sports Complex, was part of government's aggressive sports infrastructural drive and is the first of 10 being constructed across the country. Government said it formed part of efforts to address the sports infrastructure deficit in Ghana. The facilities, when completed, would each house an 8-lane athletic track, a FIFA standard pitch, career counseling center, basketball and handball court, as well as a multi-purpose sports hall, a restaurant, and an ICT center. The mini stadiums would also have a seating capacity of 5,000. The most disappointing thing about this place is that it looks like it was actually this close to completion. A majority of the money had already been spent, and what was left to finish the project was only a fraction. But that fraction hasn't come. And of course the contractors departed, and the place has now degenerated into this eyesore.
That is you and I's $4 million just sleeping there, spent on a facility to unearth talent. And just because of 400,000 Ghana cedis, trust me, if you send your son or daughter to the Azuma Nelson Youth Resource Center, trust me, that child will be missing, and you'll have to go and look for your child. It's absolutely incomprehensible. It's incomprehensible that so much that government said they were going to do for sports in the country. This is what we have. And guess what? We were made to understand there was no money. When we asked questions, they said, oh, they didn't have a board. It was being managed by the National Youth Authority. They said the acting chief executive officer could not spend up to 100,000 Ghana. They needed a board. Guess when the board was formed? And guess what the facility looks like? Just as you saw. Next week, we'll be taking you to Koforidua, where you'll be seeing another eyesore of a facility. Millions of dollars pumped into these facilities. And like I was asked yesterday, is there any sector that's actually functioning in this country? That's a question you and I would have to answer. AM Sports here with me, Muftar Nabila Abdullahi.
Acknowledge the reality of the fact that our economy is in considerable difficulty. The budget drawn for the 2022 fiscal year was thrown out of gear, disrupting our balance of payments and debt sustainability, and further exposing the structural weaknesses of our economy. We have gone to the International Monetary Fund to repair in the short term our public finances and restore our balance of payments, while we continue to work on the medium to long-term structural changes that are at the heart of our goal of constructing a resilient, robust Ghanaian economy and building a Ghana beyond aid. Just as we managed to achieve a staff-level agreement with the fund in record time in December last year, whose terms we are systematically fulfilling, including the difficult but ultimately highly successful process of the domestic debt exchange program. I'm confident that with the cooperation we are receiving from members of the Paris Club and the People's Republic of China, which has sent a delegation from China's Exim Bank to Accra over the weekend to meet with officials of the Ministry of Finance, we shall be able to go to the board of the fund to conclude finally the agreement by the end of March. This will set the stage for the strong recovery of Ghana's economy. Needless to say, we would hope that all Ghana's friends would weigh in with words of support at the fund?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the government has taken the right steps, has reached out very actively. I don't see anything that anybody else could have done better. It is really at this point of time, it is really the question on how to convince particular China to come to the table. That is the key question right now. Because all the others, I mean, the Paris Club members have agreed; they are ready. But again, they are not willing to lower the request to Ghana, and with this financing the debts of China. I mean, that must be understandable for everybody. So we are ready to negotiate, but only if all the other creditors are willing, are taking up their responsibility in the same way. Basically, as I said, it will be in the framework of existing cooperation, and we might be willing to consider some additional funds to be added. I mentioned the important part of vocational training, because competitiveness is about skilled labor and quality of the workforce, especially if you look at competitiveness in the region. So that's an important part of support. And secondly, it's also about financial access to financing. The World Bank, jointly with the German Development Bank KfW and the African Development Bank, supported Ghana in the setup of the Development Bank of Ghana. For us, this is the key tool for supporting the business sector, and we have supported the build-up of this bank, and we hope that this bank will prove to be very, very helpful for the sector, and we might be willing to look into adding up this financing window for this bank. Well, of course, it depends very much on what kind of expenditures you're looking at, and there are certain. I'm convinced this is true for. If I look at the budget of the German Foreign Ministry of the German government, I'm convinced there are important parts that can be cut without hurting the economic development. And
Welcome back on the AM show. Now we get into our big stories, and we're talking about our external debt. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has hinted that a planned high-level government delegation to China has been postponed to late March 2023. This is owing to the upcoming National People's Congress of China, a meeting scheduled for early March. However, the Finance Minister said bilateral talks would continue ahead of this important mission. Government is seeking, under the G20 Common Framework for Debt Treatment, to get debt forgiveness from some bilateral and multilateral partners. We discussed this together with government's quest to seek debt cancellation with our guests, Professor Godfred Bokpin. He's a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Dr. Saad Idrisu is economist, Louisiana Economic Development. We also have other guests joining the conversation. We have Leslie Dwight, Mensa economist and senior researcher, Institute of Fiscal Studies. But Kofi Ajay, my colleague here, data analyst, researcher, joins the conversation. He will set the tone for this conversation. Kofi, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Ben.
It's good to hear from you. For a moment, when I heard that beep, I was wondering whether you were in there. It's good to have you as always. Now, Kofi, we've settled our domestic debt exchange program, but externally, there remains a lot to be tackled so we can secure that IMF deal. What are some of the salient points we should be addressing, we should be looking at in this regard?
Well, it's true we've been able to do domestic debt restructuring, but currently the biggest hurdle to cross will be the external debt restructuring, because we have an external debt portfolio worth somewhere $29 billion, dollars. And if you look at the 2021 debt report and you try to study the data put out by the finance ministry, you realize that as a country, we pay close to $2.5 billion, dollars every year to our external creditors as loan service. And so you look at such a huge amount and then look at the kind of situation you find yourself in, the fact that you do not have the liquidity to do such loan servicing, then it is very important for you to do something to make sure that you save yourself some dollars in 2023, so that you do not have to use the few that you have to settle loans. Now, if you want to restructure your external debts, then you have to look at the components of it as well. And if you look at the data available, majority of our debts sold to the Eurobond market, of which when we study the data, we realize that in the next 10 years, we'll be paying close to $8 billion as principal payments. We're not even talking about interest payments on this $7 billion. So the country finds itself in a very dire situation as far as debt servicing at the international front is concerned. But the biggest elephant in the room here when you talk about debt restructuring is China, because China is the only single country that has a debt burden on Ghana worth $1.7 billion. Even if you combine all Paris Club debts that we owe them, is just $1.9 billion. If you compare that to China, it tells you that we have a huge debt burden with China. They are our biggest bilateral, creditor on the international front. So restructuring of our debt means you need to get China to play ball, but we find ourselves in a very dire situation where China will probably only forgive you if the debts you are owing them is interest-free. And so we find templates across African countries where, for instance, Congo wanted to restructure a debt burden of $3 or $4 billion. They reached out to China. They wanted, debt cancellation, and China was only willing to play ball so long as Congo agrees to extend the maturity period and then also increase the coupon rate or the interest rate. So instead of Congo's $1.4 billion debts, after the restructuring, they ended up with a debt burden of $1.6 billion. So China will only agree to play ball if you also agree to extend, the maturity period or also increase the interest payment. But forgiveness, if you look at Ghana's debt books and then how much we owe to China.
But just a quick point to clarify. So once you're extending the maturity period, what we've seen with China is that they would expect you to pay more over time. So let's say if it was 6 years and now it's going to be extended to about 8 or 9 years, you're going to end up paying more in terms of interest on the same debt, right?
Exactly. So just like we saw with Congo. So they ended up paying 1.6 billion instead of 1.4 billion, just like you rightly said. But on the screen now, we have about 4 steps to go through in terms of the negotiations. So far, we've been able to successfully do the first one, which is to announce the default. As for the negotiations, we've started. Most of the external creditors have given us the assurance, especially the Paris Club. But just like I said, the biggest elephant in the room is China. And China is holding about 1.7 billion of our debt. So it's so significant to make sure that we get China to come to the table to play ball as long as this debt negotiation restructuring is concerned. So if you look at the data, for instance, over the years, China, they do debt forgiveness, but it's just a fraction, a small fraction of the debt burden they have, the loans that they've actually given to country. So if you look at Ghana, for instance, over the past 2 decades, China has only forgiven us $208 million of our debt. But the monies we've taken from China, I think since 1996, is around $4 billion. That's the accumulated value of monies we've taken from China. Most of these loans we've taken from China are project loans. And so we usually use our minerals as collateral. So I am looking at the last loan that we took from China, for instance. It was on the Ghana Rural, the telephone and digital inclusive project. And the loan amount was 140 million euros. And then it was from the Exim Bank of China. So it was for communication. So usually when we take project loans from China, we use our minerals as collateral. So the China Hydro deal is a perfect example where we are using our bauxite as the collateral to get a $2 billion loan from China. But if you look at our books, we are owing China about 1.7 billion, cumulatively taking about 4.8 billion from China over the years. And most of it have been project loans and collateralized in our minerals.
Well, thank you, Kofi, for setting the tone for the conversation. We're going to be deliberating on exactly those points that you made, like Kofi Ajay, data analyst, researcher here at the Multimedia Group, made mention of. China is that big elephant in the room. If we're going to get our external debt, in a sort of good way so that we can proceed with an IMF deal, it would require China playing ball. But the question is, will they play ball? Will we give them enough reason to? Let's start with Professor Bokpin and the rest of the guests who are joining us via Zoom. Prof, a very good morning to you. All right, so we'll try to get some of the other guests. Do we have Dr. Idrisu, Dr. Saad Idrisu?
Hiya, good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Doc. I hope you're well.
Good.
It's good to have you connect with us this morning on the show. I'd like to find out from you. So the DDEP is out of the way. Not totally, though, because there are still problems like the payment of bonds, for which reason now March 13 has been tabled in terms of some of those payments that should have been made. But when it comes to our external debt, there's no way of moving forward without taking care of that. And we realize that we have to deal with our Eurobond partners, those who have been buying our debt. We have to look at China, which is the single biggest bilateral partner we have when it comes to this issue. And then we also have to look at the Paris Club. Where do you see that we are currently in this process?
Thank you again, Ben, and good morning to all your listeners. Hold on, I think I'm having a problem with my connection.
Okay.
Yes, good morning to you and good morning to all your listeners. Actually, following the discussions with China is something that, shouldn't have happened, but unfortunately, Ghana finds itself
Dr. Idrisu, I would appreciate it if you could speak up a bit. I can barely hear you. Were you saying that the discussions with China or borrowing from China shouldn't have happened? I got lost there.
Well, I'm saying that whatever is happening in Ghana currently with regards to the DDEP, which was the Domestic Debt Exchange Program, as well as this external debt restructuring, it shouldn't have been happening. But unfortunately, Ghana finds itself in this particular situation, and we are forced to deal with China. Whether they want to play ball or not, we will have no option than to actually work with them. Because if you look at all what is happening with regards to the GDP and the external debt restructuring, it all points to a certain factor of government failure. Government failure in the sense that, there has been form of not following the fiscal discipline, which has resulted in overspending or which has resulted in a lot of mismanagement, contributing to this particular factor. But if the government is not able to manage its debts very well, then definitely you get into this, government failure situation we are finding ourselves in.
Now, if you look at what we've been presented with, our bilateral partners, our multilateral partners, the president recently, for example, was calling on the German, ambassador to Ghana to plead with China in terms of easing up on our debt, in terms of some debt forgiveness, if possible. You look at the domestic debt, 14.7 billion, like we've put in your short, and external debt, 29.2 billion. Now, we've dealt with the domestic debt, so to speak, but the external debt is just about twice, a little over, twice the figure that we're looking at for the local debt. How much of a constraint do you feel this is going to be in terms of securing an IMF deal, especially when Mr. President is telling us that, look, by close of this month, we should have made quite a lot of progress in terms of securing an IMF program?
Well, I think it's quite good for listeners to actually get to appreciate the scenario we are currently in. If you look at the external debt of $29 billion, Ghana owes China about 40% of those debts. So China is one of our biggest external creditor that Ghana will have to deal with, which is 1.7 billion. So with that sort of situation, if China doesn't really participate that much or join the other creditors, then definitely we might kind of hit a wall in that regard. But if you look at China, China is part of the G20 country, but it's not part of the Paris Club members. So if you make a combination of all the other creditors who are willing to come on board, minus China, then in that case, we are going to have a particular issue.
That would mean about half of what you're trying to deal with is not going to be available to you.
Refusing to participate in that agreement. And the main issue here is that if you take a look at the G20 framework, the G20 framework comes, the debt structure under the G20 common framework comes with certain rules, certain structures, which China may not be willing to follow under these circumstances. So if you look at the whole issue, my understanding is that China is willing to deal with government of Ghana on a bilateral basis. So China to Ghana directly dealing one-on-one on its debts so that China could tell us what it will do with its debts instead of joining the other creditors on the table. So that is the options that we will be looking at. But if you look at this particular scenario, Ghana wouldn't be in a very strong position to negotiate if it is just dealing directly on a bilateral level with China. Following what has happened in cases like Sri Lanka, where China had to come in and take over the Sri Lanka port.
Yeah, the port.
Over 70% shares in that particular port. So that tells you that if you are going to deal directly with China as a country, you may end up losing some of your national assets. That is why it's good for China to come on board with the other creditors. Then there will be a general discussion on what debt relief structure to implement for Ghana.
Hold for me, Dr. Idrisu. Let me bring in Leslie Dwight Mensah as well. A very good morning to you, Leslie.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining the conversation. Leslie, by the way, is an economist, senior researcher at Institute for Fiscal Studies. When you look at our situation, some call it precarious. What do you see? The DDEP is out of the way, so to speak, but the external debt is an overhang right now. And China is that elephant in the room. How do you feel we should deal with this situation, especially considering that China has a certain track record. If you fail to meet your debt obligations, usually they are not very friendly with you. It's not that they've never granted debt relief or debt forgiveness, but they rarely do that. The best they usually do is to extend the period and you get to pay more. So what do you see as far as the G7 or the Paris Club is concerned, and then the broader umbrella, which includes China as well? What do you see?
Well, I should like to first make a number of key points. One, no creditor is obliged to forgive Ghana's.
Mr. Mensah, I would appreciate it if you could speak up a bit. I'm struggling to hear you.
Okay. I want to start by making a number of fundamental points. The first of which is that, are you able to hear me now?
I can hear you, sir.
Okay. So the first point is that no creditor is obliged to forgive Ghana's debt or to grant Ghana debt relief. The situation is that we have made requests for debt relief or debt renegotiation that are being considered. The second point is that creditors like to be treated equally or fairly in any debt renegotiation process. No creditor wants to be given the short end of the stick, as it were. This is the so-called pari passu principle, and it explains why the Paris Club members want to see China at the table. It does appear, though, that the Chinese want to negotiate with us outside the Paris Club framework. My own view is that they are entitled to demand that, and we must use the mechanism they prefer. Now, whether or not we will achieve a breakthrough with the Chinese or with any other class of creditors would depend to a large degree on the offer we put before them. As we saw with the domestic debt restructuring exercise, what moved the needle was the government's revised offers that minimized the losses that bondholders were going to suffer. So success essentially will hinge on the extent to which we make an offer that minimizes the losses on the Chinese side. This means, for example, if we are to get mere debt service deferment without net present value saving on the obligation from our bilateral creditors, we should be prepared to take it. Because as I explained from the beginning, no one is obliged to forgive our debt. The related point is that the more onerous aspect of our foreign debt service burden is the debt service expense on our Eurobonds. We need presently about $1 billion per annum to pay the interest alone on the Eurobond. The bilateral debt tends to be of shorter duration, so it is likelier that they have more principal payments coming due.
Right.
But that is something that we can address by asking for a debt service deferment, even if the Chinese or the Paris Club members refuse to grant us NPV, net present value, savings. I think we should be prepared to take it.
Right. As some analysts or economic watchers have said, China is not bound, like you're saying. They can decide not to. I mean, you go for a loan and you must meet the loan requirements. That is it. But in this instance, we know that with the G20, there are clear guidelines, laid down structures for debt restructuring. China doesn't operate within this framework. What does that mean for us as we go and literally beg them for some debt forgiveness in this instance? What does it mean? I mean, what could be the consequences?
Okay, well, so as I said, the more worrisome aspect of the foreign debt issue has to do with the debt service obligations on our commercial loans, in particular the Eurobonds. Now, it is possible at the end of this whole exercise with restructuring both our domestic and foreign debt to not meet our expectations for the debt service savings required to reach our medium-term fiscal goals as agreed with the IMF. The question then is, what should we then do? If we do not get generous enough debt service relief from our external creditors, particularly the bilateral creditors, what should we then do? First of all, my own view is that the target with the IMF to reduce the net present value of our public debt to 55% of GDP by 2028 should not be seen as cast in stone. The 55% ratio is not some magic number. It is something that can be adjusted to conform with the actual outcomes of the debt restructuring as we have conducted it. Now, second, we can offset any underattainment of our target for the debt restructuring through a stronger fiscal adjustment within the context of the government budget that we have presented, than we're currently envisaging. Our assessment at the Institute for Fiscal Studies of the 2023 budget is that in spite of the narrative, really no fiscal adjustment is going to take place in 2023. Even though the budget projects to begin to consolidate the public finances from 2024, but we can't put much faith based on historical learning in the 2024 numbers, particularly when 2024 is an election year. So there's really room and need for the government to embark upon a more concrete traditional fiscal adjustment of revenue and expenditure this year and over the medium term,
right,
to offset any potential underachievement of our expectations with the debt restructuring. Because remember, we are carrying out two forms of fiscal retrenchment in parallel. We're going through the traditional, or we plan to go through the traditional fiscal adjustment of revenue and expenditure through the budget, and we are attempting a debt adjustment. Now, we need to get the balance right. If we're not getting enough of the savings we want on the debt restructuring side, it means that the traditional fiscal adjustment of revenue and expenditure would have to carry a heavier share of the burden.
Hold for me. Let me bring in Professor Bokpin of the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, a very good morning to you.
Yes, good morning. And good morning to my co-panelists and your listeners.
Right. Thank you so much
for having me on your show.
Thank you for joining us on the show. So it's quite a conundrum that we have to deal with. Debt servicing every year in terms of the payments is around $2.5 billion. But here we are, we want an IMF program. We need that stability. You look at our debt portfolio, 13.1 billion for the Eurobonds, but then with bilateral partners, China alone, about half of that, 1.7 billion. Then you look at the Paris Club, about 1.9 billion. But that isn't really where the problem is. Because if China doesn't come along, it appears we're going to be in dire straits. And like some experts have said, look, in this deal, the debt restructuring would be at China's behest. How they want it to go is how we will be compelled to let it go. It will be on their terms, not on our terms. How does that factor into the fact that we need this IMF program as quickly as possible? What is your reading on the China situation?
Well, thank you very much. I think that we are majoring on the minor.
We are?
Yeah. And my considered view is that this whole global geopolitics with Russia, China, a bit more India on one side, And then the West, particularly Paris Club creditors, on the other hand, is playing out in Ghana's debt restructuring. And the reason I'm saying so is that there is some consciousness to make China look like a bad lender on the continent. And I think that is not fair on the part of, or which that view, that picture is not fair to be accommodated.
You're referring to debt diplomacy. Then, of course, we've always had it, and it has been said in the past that China is a bit opaque when it comes to its debt dealings and not as transparent as, for example, the G7 would be. We know they don't operate within the G20 framework when it comes to debt restructuring and all of that. Is it unfair then to look at China, especially on the back of things we've seen in Africa, in Sri Lanka, other places being seized and all of that? Is it that unfair to China?
Look, let's look at it from this perspective. That Paris Club creditors, non-Paris Club creditors, they are all on the continent for what they can get.
Agreed.
None of them is here solely for your interest. Now, if you examine the literature, whether it's China, whether it's France, US, UK, whatever, they've all used Africa as a stepping stone in their developmental process. Then China stepped in lately through debt and trade diplomacy. Now, at a time when Africa needed the West most, was actually when the West abandoned Africa.
And China filled the gap.
And then China stepped up to the plate. So China's developmental footprint on the continent in the last 20, 25 years is there for anyone and everyone to see. That is not to suggest that China is in here solely for our good. They are in here for their interests also. Unfortunately, it is only Africa that is in this with no clear strategy of what it wants from the rest of the world. Now, and the reason I'm saying so is that at a time when we needed a lot of developmental assistance, concessionary and the rest of them, the Paris Club creditors were organizing sending off parties for themselves. So if you look at the composition, bilateral, Paris Club creditors, all of them put together relative to China, do you see the balance?
Yes, it's about 200 million because China alone is 1.7 billion and all of them put together 1.9 billion.
So now, okay, so that should tell you that China has more to forgive compared to any other Paris Club creditor.
Is it not also because of our borrowing appetite and maybe to some extent our recklessness?
We can come to that. But we are saying that if you look at how China has stepped up in financing the infrastructure deficit on the continent is huge. It's huge. Now, if you are looking at restructuring your debt, I'm saying that we are majoring on the minor. Why? What is the proportion of China's debt? Look at the expert from IFS spoke about Eurobond, commercial Eurobond component. So you should look at things in relative terms of importance. But I can understand that beyond just debt restructuring, we need assurance from our bilateral creditors or development partners that they will help Ghana to close the funding gap. The point that I'm making is that, hello?
Yes, sir, I'm listening to you.
What Ghana is looking for from our bilateral creditors and multilateral partners is more than just debt forgiveness. When the IMF reached staff-level agreement with Ghana, they indicated certain prior actions that we needed to fulfill before the staff-level agreement will go to the board. I think there were about 4 of them. 1, take steps to comprehensively restructure your debt. And then obtain assurance. You see that part? Obtain assurance from your development partners, creditors, bilateral, multilateral, that they will commit to closing the funding gap. I will explain that a bit further before I come with the other one. You know why that is important?
Why?
If you pick the 2023 budget and the outlook to 2023, as government had indicated, working under the inspirational framework of the fiscal adjustment process under the IMF program, has huge fiscal deficit the next 2, 3, 4 years. Now, that same country, so if you pick the 2023 alone, the deficit is over 30 billion cedis. And I agree with the earlier expert that if you look at the 2023 budget, the government is living as though it's harvest season with its expenditure. Right? We'll come to that before we are finished. So with that deficit this year, next year, 2025, and the same country has lost market access from the Eurobond market. From the domestic market, the medium to the long-term end of the market, government has been priced out. So what it means is that merely approving the IMF program without assurance of funding to close that gap, the program can only achieve limited effectiveness. Now, that is just on one hand. On the other hand, IMF program itself, if you cost it, it will require more than what the IMF itself can provide in translating the program objectives into actual. So you actually need more than $3 billion in implementing the IMF program. So that is why the IMF will use its leverage to draw on their sister institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, and that is why they are asking for assurance from Ghana's bilateral and multilateral development partners that they will help to close the funding gap. So there's a funding gap that has to be closed. And because we cannot go to the Eurobond market and the medium to the long-term end of the market in the domestic financial market is closed, we need development partners to come on board. So the asking China to come on board goes beyond just the 1.7 billion.
Right.
Of course, we know that China typically doesn't do budgetary support. But given China's influence on the continent and the rest of them, it is then imperative that China is on board within a certain common framework of burden sharing at that level also. Right? That's where it's important. Then the other prior action that they announced was the audit and publication of COVID-19 expenditure. As I will said this before, that's how come it was released. Then there was also another which was utility adjustment. The framework was to ask for close to 60% electricity price adjustment, effective 1st February. That has also been done. Of course, they didn't get exactly the 60%, right? That has also been done. So these are prior actions that must be done before IMF board would approve the program. Otherwise, if they approve it under this financing constraint, the program can only achieve limited effectiveness. So that is the angle. Now, if you look at how much we owe China.
Prof, just to prompt that, there's a whole lot more we have to exhaust on this conversation. So briefly on this point, so we can move on to other points as well with the other guests. Just had to interject to make mention of that. Please go ahead, Prof.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that we should be able to get an IMF program.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Whether China agrees to forgive us of their debt or not, the IMF should be able to give us a program. Because how much we owe China is not that material in the scheme of debt restructuring. But to the extent that we need further commitment in closing the funding gap and that building consensus is good, we should find a way of reaching out to China. And here, I will not blame China, but I would rather blame Ghana in its role currently in the diplomatic arena, the global diplomatic arena, we leaning more towards the West.
Are you speaking
that portrays us in a certain way to Russia and China and even India?
I was about to get to exactly that. For example, we spoke about the Burkina Faso situation, and what our president said about the Wagner Group. Then in recent times, it had to do with that vote at the UN General Assembly and all of that. I mean, yes, some would say that that means we're leaning more towards the West, but look, we're also speaking to the Russians. Let's face it, we're getting Russian oil in this country. Very recent scenes as well. So
remember
is that going to affect the situation in any way?
Yeah, that is what I'm saying, that Ghana needed to have evaluated its strategy carefully. Okay, what is the strategy? What is it that is guiding our utterances and our position? What do we want? I'm sure what we wanted was to cut the West more. And so if you check right from the IMF managing director and a lot of the comment from the West has been to absorb Ghana's government from the current mess. That it was not Ghana. It was solely Russia, Ukraine. Check the comment of the IMF managing director.
No, I am fully aware. In fact, she had an interaction with me and said exactly that. COVID-19, Russo-Ukrainian war. That was what she told me.
But let me conclude by saying that in the midst of that narrative, it is clear, even to the diplomatic community, that Ghana is a spoiled child that needs to be disciplined and needs to be told the truth, that cut expenditure, be responsible. In other words, they are telling that be responsible. You cannot continue to live your life anyhow and expect other people to use their balance sheet to sustain you. Because if you look at how much we owe China, with some level of expenditure cut, we could actually undo that. That is where the future is. The future does not lie in begging China, begging US, and the rest of them. The future lies in being responsible as a country that has gained independence for almost 66 years.
All right.
You have to be responsible.
Do hold for me, Prof. I mean, my takeaway from what you've said so far, Ghana is that spoiled child that needs discipline. Ghana is that spoiled child that needs discipline, and we need to be more responsible in managing finances. But let me come to Dr. Idrisu. So, based on the discussions we've had so far, you would realize that the German ambassador hinted recently in that discourse, a rare one, by the way, that, look, the Paris Club is not going to give Ghana relief from debt if it will be used to service China's debt. Prof has said that those ones focusing on China is a bit of a minor issue. But how do you feel this specific bit will not give you relief if you're going to use the debt to pay China? So we have the West and the East on one end, and China is a big figure. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that is very true. If you look at the geopolitics that is happening around our debts in particular, you realize that the Russia, China, US geopolitics is actually playing a role here. But I do believe Ghana still have a bit of options in here, in the sense that if If China refuses to join voluntarily and wants to meet Ghana on the bilateral level, then our government should try and see if there could be any negotiations and see the outcome of such negotiations. I mean, even though we've had instances of Sri Lanka and other countries where China seems to have freeze their assets as collateral for loans. But if they still go ahead with those negotiations, we could get something good out of that. The other option is also for China to voluntarily join the other creditors, which is the Paris Club. Then collectively, they could come out with a better debt structure for the particular scenario. But again, whether China participates or doesn't participate at all, I still believe that the IMF can go ahead and still grant Ghana this particular bailout that Ghana is looking for. Because if China doesn't participate, China will be the only creditor that is not responding. And looking at what government has done domestically with regards to the DDEP, and also if government is able to get those financial assurances, even from other developmental partners and not just China, I still believe the IMF should be able to do something if it really wants to. But again, if you
when you say do something,
saying,
if it really wants to, what do you mean? Still give Ghana go ahead with a program for Ghana?
Yes, the IMF could still go ahead and approve the program for Ghana, even without China's participation. I mean, let's be realistic. It's the board makes the decision. Some of these things are just international politics playing a role. They don't need China to participate before they could grant Ghana an IMF bailout. Let's be realistic on that point. It's just sometimes the international politics do come.
But technically, realistically, the West wouldn't want to participate and be making concessions when China is still going to be getting its debt servicing at the same levels. You do realize
the debt servicing, China is not saying that it will get the debt servicing at the same level. China is only, based on the understanding I'm having, China only wants to negotiate outside the G20 debt framework. So in that case, China will be dealing directly with Ghana on that debt restructuring level. And again, there could be an instance whereby China could probably give us an extension of our due dates, which will still, our maturity due date, which will still be good for Ghana. Then,
we'll likely end up paying more.
Cancel out our loans per se, because even though China is known, it's not really something that they do over the years. If China is about to cancel your loans, probably maybe you are left with some few balance to pay off, then maybe they will end up canceling. But if you are owed so much, you don't just expect total cancellation of the debts. But at least they could grant us an extension of the maturity due dates, and that will still be good for Ghana in this particular case. And I'm emphatically stating it that the IMF can still go ahead and approve this $3 billion funding for Ghana, even without China's participation. These are all geopolitical stuff happening within our debt situation. Because if you take the other Paris Club, the other multilateral agencies and all that, they are all more or less from the West. You get it. And I'll come to the reason why China is probably also not deciding to participate in this particular regard. With regards to what you were just talking about, unfortunately, our government, or let me just say the president, sometimes speaks as if, a man who is about to orgasm. You understand? When it comes to international politics or geopolitics, you have to play your ball well to such that you don't step on a lineman. If you look at what started in April 2022, when government communicators were all over blaming Russia for Ghana's economic woes, all radio stations, all TV stations, government communicators were blaming Russia for starting the war in Ukraine. So it forced the Russian embassy in Accra to respond to the government in April through a Twitter post and all that. So it's like you started some form of diplomatic rift between you and Russia. Then if you go back to what happened in December 2022 again, with the president making allegations of the Russian mercenaries and all that, you realize that Moscow came out vehemently and denied any association with Wagner Group and stuff like that. So if you keep doing this, you are creating some diplomatic rift between you and Russia. And you know China and Russia are allies. So when you do that, it's like if you offend my friend and you come to me, you don't expect me to just give you an open arms. We've had President Rawlings. He played the geopolitics very well. He never stepped on the toes of Russia or America or China. We've had President Mills. He did the same thing. We've had President Kufuor. He did the same thing. We've had President Mahama. He did the same thing. As a president, there are certain things you just don't say publicly. Even no matter how you feel you want to say it, you must be guided, because whatever you say publicly will actually have a political effect on your economy. And that is why, or what that is the case we are facing right now.
So you're saying that in terms of managing that geopolitical fine line, that fine rope, President Akufo-Addo has not done what his predecessors have done.
He hasn't done what is expected of a president in managing the geopolitical line. Because everyone knows that these three nations, China, Russia, America, are the superpowers of the world. You don't want to pick sides. Even if you are picking sides, pick it in your heart, pick it in your bedroom, pick it in your cabinet meetings, but don't go to Washington, don't go public places to pick sides. And that's why I gave you examples of former President Rawlings was able to play it, you know, at the Mills, Kufuor, John Mahama. They all knew about the thin line that happened. It's like a landmine. If you step wrongly, it's just going to blast you. And that is the situation we are facing now.
Right. Let me bring in Leslie Mensah into the conversation as well. As we wrap on China, I want us to get into other things, but to conclude on the Chinese element in all of this, do you feel we have done ourselves a bit of a disservice by relying too much on Chinese loans, much like what other countries in Africa have done? But if China decides to play hardball and say, we're sticking to our guns, we're not going according to the G20 rules of debt restructuring, we're going to deal with you on a bilateral level, Ghana, China, or China, Ghana, in which case we are likely going to get a far less good deal. Would you say that would be burning our fingers and moving forward we should learn lessons? What do you think, vis-a-vis what is happening with the Western countries or the G7? Hello, Leslie?
Yes. I'm saying that we ought to learn lessons from the entire debacle, you know, this entire crisis we're in. And the disservice we have done ourselves is really to build up debt beyond our capacity to pay. You know, my own contention is that the Chinese credit lines often tend to be more flexible and, in fact, give us greater control over the use of the funds. So the Chinese credit lines do have some advantages over the traditional, you know, support and credit lines we have received from the Western partners. But the point I'll make, you know, to end this part of the discussion is that, look, it is Ghana that needs the IMF program so badly. It is Ghana that needs the budgetary commitment of our partners so badly. And we're involved in this operation to achieve a number of things. One, we aim to begin to rebuild our public finances in order to stabilize the macroeconomy. Now, second, we also need to address a hard currency crunch that has been enduring since 2022. We simply do not have enough foreign exchange to pay our bills and to service our debt. You know, this explains why we announced the suspension of our external debt service payment. And securing the fund program, as well as the budgetary funding commitments of our partners, will unlock new foreign exchange inflows to ameliorate that situation. And you'll observe that the exchange rate has sort of been hanging in there, waiting to see the direction in which all these things will go. The third point, which really adds to the point Professor Bokpin made, is that we need to secure financing for the budget because we do not have definite or confirmed funding for some of the expenditures in the 2023 budget. And accounting on the program, the budgetary support assurances we'll get from our partners to unlock funding. In fact, from what I see in the budget, about 64 billion cedis of the expenditures in the 2023 budget do not have any definite or confirmed funding. So we really need to conclude this operation, the restructuring of the debt, the agreement of the fund program, the procurement of the financing assurances from our partners quite rapidly so that we can bring some certainty to the public finance situation and to the macroeconomic outlook.
Let me bring in Professor Bokpin once more. So, looking at where we find ourselves, you were speaking a short while ago in my earlier interaction with you. You referred to Ghana as that spoiled child needing discipline. The German ambassador to Ghana recently has spoken of the fact that if we're going to engage in this debt restructuring and all of that, we should also look at budgetary cuts. And he makes the allusion that, look, my country has fewer ministers than you do in your country. In fact, what he was basically saying was, you're a small country, you don't have an economy like mine. My country borrows to your country, yet you spend so much in certain areas that could easily be cut off. What is your reaction on that point as we get forward to, gear up to wind on that conversation? Briefly, Professor Bokpin.
I was of the view a couple of months ago that we were going to get to this point where the diplomatic community, even if they were speaking to government in private to do something about the size and the expenditure, they will come openly. Because what Ghana should know is that there's likely to be donor fatigue somewhere along the line.
Are we not there already?
We are almost there. We are almost there. And that is why, you see, when it gets to the point where diplomats begin to speak openly like this, then it tells you a lot has been going on behind the scenes. Discussions among themselves. And all of us must support that call because that is where our future lies. If you look at the global landscape, there are challenges in the US they themselves have to fix. UK has challenges. Germany has challenges. So if you look at the last 25 years, these Paris Club creditors have been actually winding off in terms of their developmental assistance. You check the data. So that tells you that there is no way you can look forward to this channel of support consistently. And as a country, we must be responsible. That is where the solution is. Look, let's encourage Ghana to be responsible and pay its debt. It comes with some level of integrity, right? This country must have a certain minimum level of pride as a country, as a pride that resides in our sovereignty, Ghana. We must. It serves us no good overall to be begging consistently. It dwarfs businesses that operate from here. It dwarfs the net wealth of our financial institutions as they interact with the outside world through correspondent banking, credit lines, and all of that. You see, what you gain by being responsible and the respect that you get and the competitive trading arrangement and investment you're able to secure because you are responsible far outweigh what you gain by being irresponsible and begging for debt forgiveness day in, day out.
Right.
No. China, 1.7 billion, we could actually cut expenditure and that will not hurt growth and we'll be able to pay off China. We must be responsible. Right. We must. The future, look, the best helping hand we can find is at the end of our own arm. It will not even come from the IMF.
Right.
the 17th IMF program will not solve Ghana's problems sustainably. It will not.
Okay.
If we don't decide, and what we are saying here, hello?
I'm listening.
The point that we are making here is not because this government is in power. No government in the next 40 years should have more than 40 ministers. If any government cannot govern with less than 40 ministers, they should leave and give the opportunity to those who can do it.
Okay.
Let's sanitize our public finance. We have created a reward incentive mechanism that rewards laziness through politics. And the real sector suffers because people don't want to go to the real sector where you need to work hard and have the kind of lifestyle you want to have. People want to load their lifestyle on the public purse. This is not sustainable.
Right.
Let's encourage our president to rise up to the occasion. Look, we all believed in Nana. In 2016, Nana can do it. Nana should rise up to the occasion to do that, and that will rally support and confidence behind him and the economy. And the impact of that will be more than China canceling $1.7 billion. They can cancel all of that, and in less than 2 years, we'll get back to the same point.
Point made. Interesting point. Professor Bokpin, we're going to have to hang up the conversation here. Thank you so much for having joined the conversation. Professor Godfred Bokpin is a lecturer at the University of Ghana, specifically the University of Ghana Business School. I'll come to you, Leslie, in just about a minute. What are your expectations in all of this? We will be going to China to seek some relief, so to speak, in terms of our debt. What are your expectations? And in terms of an IMF program, what are your expectations in terms of that as well? That question for both you and Dr. Idrisu, but I'll start with you, Leslie.
I'd say that we should take whatever we get, through these negotiations. And let me correct a point that you made earlier. If the Chinese agree simply to defer the repayment of our obligations and require that we pay interest on the deferred portion of the debt, that would not necessarily amount to paying more in net present value terms. Okay? Even though in cash terms, you may be paying more overall to the Chinese,
which is the point I was making, by the way.
Value terms, you would not necessarily be paying more. Then the final point really is to say that, look, the government needs to get its priorities right. Okay? It's fine to have nice ambitions and to want to spend public money to support the economy, to grow the economy. But the big question is, what do you need to do now to address the crisis we're in? And the answer really, fundamentally, is to have restrained fiscal policy rather than to hold on to your spending intentions. Doing that would mean misplacing your priorities.
Leslie, thank you so much for having joined the conversation. Leslie Dwight Mensah is an economist and senior researcher with the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Let's cap off the conversation with Dr. Saad Idrisu. Dr. Idrisu, what are your final thoughts?
Well, my final thoughts are that whatever be the case, unless the IMF should look Ghana's way and give Ghana the approval that it deserves with regards to the board level approval. But there's something interesting that I really want Ben to draw your attention to and the attention of your listeners and the entire country. Ghana in particular, we borrow to waste and not to develop. And until we fix this particular issue, no matter how much the country borrows, there wouldn't be any meaningful development that will come out of it. It doesn't matter which government is in power. And why do I say this? Ben, let's go back to President Rawlings' era. Whatever monies that were borrowed and some projects started, up to now, go around the country, you will find abandoned projects from Rawlings' era. Come to Kufuor's era, monies that were borrowed and projects were started with those funds. Some of them are still uncompleted. Ghana is paying those loans plus the interest, but we are not getting the economic return from the projects. Same way, if you come under Mills, under Rollins, under JM, and under Nanago, look at the Segleme housing. Monies were borrowed to start it. Right now, it is rotten. We are not getting the economic value of the borrowing that was being done. Look at the E blocks that were started. Monies were borrowed to start it, but we are not getting the economic returns from that borrowing. So we have a country whereby we just have an appetite for borrowing, just for borrowing's sake. But at the end of the day, any new government that comes into power will abandon all the projects that were started with these borrowed funds.
Right.
So where are we going as a nation if Parliament cannot come out to pass a law that will compel any successive government to continue the projects of its predecessors? Because the funds that were borrowed to start those projects are on behalf of Ghana, not the president in particular.
Right. We have
so
to.
That is where we really need to focus on if we want to move ahead as a responsible nation.
Dr. Idrisu, grateful as always for your time. And our speakers have left us with a lot to think about. Professor Bokpin, for example, saying we're like a spoiled child and we need discipline in terms of tightening the financial belt. And he also says no government moving on should have more than 40 ministers. And that, I mean, if you can't do with that, then you might as well step aside. A lot of thoughts that have been shared here on this bit, but we'll see how things pan out, especially from our engagements with the Chinese. But stay with us on the AM show. Up next, we've got AM Business, courtesy of EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. Today, my colleague James Ashen interacts with former Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, Dr. Tony Obin, on how Ghana can leverage the discovery of lithium for economic growth. Up next on the AM show. Do stay.
In 2021, we discovered lithium, and there have been a lot of questions with respect to it being a curse or a blessing to Ghana. Now, let me just start by asking that how do we leverage on this lithium to ensure economic growth?
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Now, lithium, I mean, I think it's a shot in the arm of this country by discovering lithium, because now it's become the magic mineral now, especially given that the world is going less on fossil fuel. The fact that there's a requirement for batteries, the fact that we are looking at electric vehicles rather than using fossil fuel powered vehicles. So from the point of view of the climate change, it's a positive thing. Now, for a mineral to be a curse or a blessing, depends on how you manage it. A mineral that has been given to you, you did not plant it, cannot be a curse. It must be a blessing. If you don't manage its exploitation and utilization well, then it becomes a curse on you. So I don't think God wanted to curse us by giving us gold. God wanted to curse us by giving us lithium. I think it is how we mine the gold, how we will mine the lithium, and how we will use the benefit of the minerals. If we will use we will use the minerals as a conduit for corruption. If you use the minerals for individual personal benefit rather than national benefit. If we use the minerals to establish more schools, more hospitals, and improve our infrastructure, it cannot be a curse. For me, the issue of always relying on taxes as a benefit from the exploitation of our natural resources is quite not enough. And I think we have to be innovative in the way we seek benefit from our minerals.
Some are saying having government invest directly, sometimes when you look at certain institutions, if government is investing, there is some sort of lack of monitoring. I don't know if you should.
No. What you do is, I mean, it's happened before. Ethiopian Airlines.
Yeah.
It is a government. I mean, it's an Ethiopian government entity. I think it's a partnership, but it is run on a very professional basis. Extremely professional running of Ethiopian Airlines. If you go to Botswana, and I can't stop talking about them, the biggest diamond production is is owned 51% by government. You see, and then 49 by the Botswana. I mean the Oppenheimer family. Now, and the management is professional. It is not based on. I am the MPP chairman, so I should be the managing director of that. I am the NDC secretary, so I have to be the
non-partisan.
Yeah, it must be purely professional. And for the state, we have destroyed this country with overly partisan approach to things. You know, you go to places and they say, "And we all can home. Is it part of us?" And you get somehow wobbled by that because the country is for Ghanaians, and therefore those who are competent to do things must be allowed to do it.
Governments involving directly into this lithium production. You've also spoken about some private sector investments. Let's look at the percentage-wise. What percentage should government come with, and what percentage should the private sector also get out of this?
No, you cannot legislate what percentage government should bring or not, but I think government should do proper studies. The skills are there for such studies to be done, and then government can, use legal means to buy shares into it, because already government has 10%. It is sitting there and relaxing. So if government, let's say initially government cannot take 50%, if it grows it to 40%, and then the only involvement of government is just that Ghanaians who are professionals should be involved in that, and then the profit that will be shared, Ghana will get its big share or its 40% share profit of the activity. So and then if as things evolve, it turns out that it's a good business and there are other concessions somewhere, Ghana can go in for it, and then some Ghanaian companies can go in for it. Government can buy shares in it, and then it is managed professionally. The only difference is being managed professionally, because the mining itself can be done by Ghanaians. It is just managing it, because those people who come here, the addition they make is just professional management, technically competent management. That's all. Even if it means Ghana must hire technically competent people to manage it, that is it. And then also the country must really understand what has been discovered to be the real figure. Sometimes for lack of competence, we always take the information that is delivered to us by the exploiter. I say that it is 20,000 ounces or 18 million tons. Is it really what it is? Is it just a book figure that is used somewhere? And I don't doubt them necessarily, but I believe that we may also have proper independent check, evaluation of the information. It's not just when they've written those things, well, okay, they found 18 million tons, and so it's good. Let's take it as gospel truth. We should be able to understand seriously what is there. Already, it is streamlined. It is just that we need to look at the lines and see whether the stream is really that there are no leakages anywhere. So the exploiter produces the gold. It goes through some milling process. You just get the gold, and it is supposed that a metallurgist that belongs to government, the state metallurgists, so to speak, would be able to declare that the quantity that has been produced is exactly normally the customs people in most mining companies. There must be some metallurgists with the customs people who would affirm that this is really the amount that is produced. Do we have a mechanism of affirming that? We need to know whether we have a mechanism of affirming that. The current system is to assay. Now, I think there's a discussion between government and I believe the chamber.
Now we'll come to the Chinese bit, but let's look at revenue. According to the Institute of Economic Affairs, are saying the extractive industry in Ghana are not being taxed enough, but they should be taxed enough to, sort of help government rake in revenue domestically. You've been the Chief Executive Officer for Minerals Commission for some time now. What do you make of that particular report or assertion from the IEA?
I think it's a lazy man's approach to getting revenue for government. And already Ghana is not well centered when it comes to taxes from the extractive. Maybe we haven't spread our tax network wide enough. For example, the small-scale mining sector. Maybe government hasn't streamlined the process so well that even though we produce so much gold from the small-scale mining sector, for example, some time ago, about 35%, 40% of total amount of gold produced came from small-scale mining. Yet the amount of tax that was received from that sector was negligible. If that is what he's talking about, if it's about the spread, then that's fine. But you just don't impose tax. You want to impose tax that will not overly hurt the sector. Having said that, still the mining sector constitutes one of the largest taxpayers in this country. In spite of the allegation that they are not being taxed enough, I think they still constitute one of the largest areas for revenue to government. And of course, once you introduce too many taxes, you tend to make explorers think too much. That then let me look for another country to explore because the tax is reasonable there. So I don't think over taxation is the approach.
Talking about the Chinese and all that, and also linked to illegal mining, Galamsey, what is the best way to deal with Galamsey?
I think that you cannot completely eradicate illegal mining, but small-scale mining is very important to this country. Any government that stops small-scale mining does so at its peril. So that one is established. Now, how do we do it properly? We've seen, when there was a time when it was illegal, it was outlawed to do mining by Ghanaian, in that sense. But people were doing it in a surreptitious way. So it took until 1989 when the then PNDC government found out that we are using the military to chase them, still they are going. You are using the police to chase them, you are doing scatter, still they are going. So let's find a way of regularizing them. Do you know that Apiteshi was illegal to brew? Apiteshi, yes. And at a point in time, government found out that, look, people are brewing, people are drinking, so let us regularize and control it. Now, how many people do Apiteshi? They don't even know. It's mighty power and all those things which are there. It improved. So government at that time realized that let us regularize it. So they regularized it. The problem is, why haven't we seen some sanity in that area? One of it is what I've told you. The issue of people who are involved, who are not supposed to be involved. And two, the investment in that area. Yes, money is required to start small-scale mining in the way it is being operated now. It's a barter trade approach to getting the oil. And I believe government intention was to ensure that instead of going with dollars, it goes with a commodity, which has also been priced in dollars. So it's like you bringing me the mobile phone, I'll bring you some cassava from my farm, and if you're happy with that exchange, it's fine. Now, the danger here is that this is based purely on certain stability. Okay, government would have bought the gold with local currency. So now, if the local currency appreciates, then you would also want to question, whether it's still viable. Again, one needs to understand whether government actually went through a proper process in getting that arrangement, because this is quite different. What my reading is that Parliament is still looking for the agreement to comment on or to do something with it. The thing in itself is there's nothing wrong with that. If we will buy oil anyway, and then our gold, we will get benefit from it anyway. So instead of selling, if we say we are just giving you the gold, give me the same value of the gold that I'm giving you in oil, that's okay. But whether we will always maintain that relationship in terms of the exchange exchange rate changes, and how long is it locked in? Is it that for 6 months we're going to give you gold of this quantity and you're going to give me oil of this quantity? And if oil price go down and you have locked in that amount of gold, what do you do? So that's why it needs to be transparent. People have to comment on it. But conceptually, I don't see anything wrong. I'll be blunt, I will say no, because if I'm struggling, so then it means that it's not being transparent enough. The concept is good and really not very extremely innovative. It's just an arrangement that says, instead of paying money, paying dollars, I'll keep my dollars, but the gold that I would get, which could have generated me dollars, I will use that to buy the oil. So it's the same. It's like I told you, the mobile phone and my cassava. Yeah. Instead of selling my cassava to buy the mobile phone, I am giving you the cassava, the same quantity, the value, and then taking your mobile phone. You are happy. I am also happy. However, if the price of cassava goes up, and I've locked in that for a period, then it means I'm paying more. You see what I mean? Or if the price of mobile phone goes down, and I've locked in some value of cassava which earlier, then I'll be losing if I still continue to give you the same. So that's why people must know how long. Is it a daily thing? Is it on spot sale, or what does it mean? Yeah. So those details have to come out, and then we'll see whether there's benefit, because everybody wants Ghana to do well. Everybody wants. We all want our city to be stable, our foreign reserve to be good enough, but we need to all contribute to making it the way we all want it.
Welcome back, and like you can see in the background, right after AM Business, we're focusing on the Nigerian election. Some conclusivity there, but is this what the Nigerian people expected, that the INEC could do or deliver the elections that the Nigerian people would have wanted, and whose hopes have been shattered? Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi said that these elections, or the results, should be cancelled. But a certain Bola Tinubu has been declared president-elect of the Republic of Nigeria. Getting into the details with us, Kayla Megwa. She is with Channels Television. Kayla, it's really good connecting with you once more. Thank you for joining the conversation. Can you hear me, Kayla?
Yes, I can. Thanks for having me.
It's really good having you join the conversation. Let me start with the mood in Nigeria. What has the mood been like, especially with the declaration by the INEC that Bola Tinubu of the APC is president-elect?
So we have quite a heated polity. I actually took my time out this morning just to go buy petrol and see, how people are feeling. And it's the only conversation. It's the only conversation everywhere. You have people who are celebrating. You have people who are upset. But ultimately we have a president-elect. And I think the rambling started from yesterday, when the opposition, People's Democratic Party, and the Labour Party and the ADC held a press conference before the announcement of the results were made. At the time, I think there were just 17 states that had been called. But they released a statement, they actually held a press conference rejecting the entire results, saying that they wanted a cancellation of the entire collation exercise, stating the fact that the BVAS machine did not translate the results to the INEC portal, which is what the promise that was given to Nigerian people was from INEC. So they're saying based on that, these numbers that you're calling out, these results that you're giving right now are illegal. And they're saying basically that they wanted the process to stop, and they wanted the INEC chairman to be removed, and a new INEC chairman from, they said, outside the commission come and complete the exercise. So a lot of demands there from the opposition, three of the opposition. Remember, we have 18 political parties. So out of the 18, 3 have come together to release, to make these statements and comments about how they do not trust this exercise. Meanwhile, in response, yesterday, the All Progressives Congress said that the process of moving the results from the BVAS machine to the INEC portal is not actionable by law. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but that's a conversation a lot of people have been having right now. Was it actionable by law? Was it not? Many people believe that it was actionable by law and that they should actually look at that situation again. So that's created a lot of the mood before the announcement was even made. Now the announcements have been made, and we're looking out to see what happens today. At least it's pretty early. We're hoping to see some congratulatory messages. We haven't seen those yet from the opponents.
Do you expect that to come on the back of the calls by the PDP and Labour, Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar, saying that they do not trust in the results? Do you expect congratulatory messages to come from them all the same?
Well, I don't expect anything, but we're watching to see what happens. Incumbency in Nigeria has many people rattled. People were really hoping that this would be the All Progressives Congress had been in office for 8 years. This probably means another 8 years. But the figures that are given by INEC, and I can see that you're actually putting it there. 25% of the votes in 2/3 of the 36 states. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, according to the results that were given by INEC, actually made 25% of the votes in 30 states. Now, they have an even number of states between the top 3 candidates of the parties. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, 12 states. Atiku Abubakar, 12 states. And Mr. Peter Obi, 11 states plus the FCT. And the FCT is one of the states. It's just the Federal Capital Territory, but it's still treated as a state in this regard. So it's actually spread quite evenly among all 3 of them. However, it is the percentage in numbers of votes. So we saw the increase there, and I can see that you're putting that up on your screen. Bola Ahmed Tinubu basically won by about 2 million votes. Second in place is Atiku Abubakar, and then of course Mr. Peter Obi with about 6 million votes as well, 6.1. Atiku Abubakar with 6.9 votes. 6.9 million votes, sorry. And then, of course, Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso with 1.4 million votes. So that's the situation that we have on ground right now. Congratulatory messages. While we don't expect anything, we're just basically watching to see what happens. Is there anyone who goes ahead and does that? We do know that there's a lot of tension in the country right now. Some people have said congratulatory messages might actually reduce these feelings of anxiety and maybe get people to calm down a little bit. After all, the way to get justice, if you feel like you have been wronged in an electoral process, is to go to court, and not resort to violence. So we're watching to see how all of this plays out, at least today and the coming days.
What have been the reactions of Tinubu supporters? We saw him dancing buga at a point, of course, celebrating on cloud 9 that he had won. And what has been the reaction of opposition supporters? For example, Peter Obi supporters. He was the third candidate in there, pulled a surprise. Some felt he could eventually win, but didn't. What have been the reactions of these supporters?
Well, we did see a protest yesterday, at least in the nation's capital, of some supporters of Peter Obi, upset about the belief that they were going to lose the election. And I think those sentiments are probably still there today. We're probably still having people who feel like they've been robbed of their mandate. The overwhelming support for Mr. Peter Obi was so great across the country, especially among young people. So there might be a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment going on right now, a lot of people in shock because they believe that this was going to be the election where their candidate was going to be sworn in as president. Not getting that from INEC may bring up a lot of, feelings of being upset among these people. So it's a lot of being upset, really, that we're seeing from people who support. And it's not just the Labour Party, it's even the People's Democratic Party. We're seeing people who are incredibly upset about the situation and, believing that, they have to do something, something has to be done to make sure that justice is served, what they term as justice being served. So we're watching to see, like I said earlier on your radio show, it's most likely that we're going to be seeing a flood of tribunals, a flood of cases in court. The election tribunals will be swamped. I can assure you that this year will be the turn of the lawyers. I can assure you that. So that's something that's going to be happening. But for now, a lot of anger and a lot of upset, a lot of disappointment, just basically watching to see how all of that translates into behavior as the days go by.
Now, even before we get into the timelines, what we can expect when the swearing in is likely to happen, even in spite of the court cases, a flood of them that will likely pour into the courts. What has been INEC's reaction? Some have called for the head of the chairperson of the INEC. Has INEC, per the people you've been speaking to in Nigeria, has the INEC lived up to expectation? They had given assurances about voting on voting day and the BVAR and all of that. Some of that, a lot of it, did not work on voting day. How have people assessed the INEC's performance?
It's not just even Nigerians, even foreign observers. That has been the major complaint of Nigerians and foreign observers. Were these elections free and fair? Some people think it was, many people think it wasn't. We do have a situation where the swearing in, well, by 11 this morning, the certificate of return is going to be given to the president-elect, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And then, of course, we're expecting a swearing in on May the 29th, whether the court cases are going on or not, because the wheels of governance have to continue turning pending on when cases are sorted out. We don't halt governance for court cases. Court cases continue alongside governance until that is sorted out, and then we can see changes or not. That's how it works, basically. But it's one of those situations where we really can't tell. Like, you see, this election was so unpredictable. We saw from the figures, maybe people didn't come out as much as we thought they were. Maybe we didn't see the crowd. Maybe the crowd that we saw was maybe the nation's capital and places like Lagos, but it didn't have that significant kick that we're expecting to have. Many people have had so many permutations of what could have been done, what couldn't have been done. How do people feel about INEC? Well, the BVAS situation is a big issue. It's still being debated everywhere. Is the translation of results from the BVAS machine to the INEC portal, is it actionable by law? Did they break the law by not doing that? That is the debate that is going on right now. Some people say they did, some people say they did not. But based on a lot of other things, training of ad hoc staff was also a problem. Late voting was a problem. Disenfranchisement as a result of late voting, and also disenfranchisement as a result of violence. So a lot of these issues have actually come to the fore. What people are trying to find out now is, how can INEC do better? What can they do to make sure that these situations do not keep occurring with every single election? It's been very disappointing to watch the electoral umpire not live up to the expectations of Nigerians, but they say they're doing what they can with what they have. So much more is expected of Nigeria's electoral body, and we're watching to see, as the governorship elections come around the corner, they're just in 10 days. And that's another set of serious elections that will be holding in 36 states of the country. So what lessons are going to be learned from the presidential election that will be used to prevent these kinds of feelings of being treated unjustly or not being or our votes not counting? That's how many Nigerians are looking at the situation to see how that plays out before the governorship and state assembly elections, which will be coming up on the 11th of this month.
Well, at least just to confirm, so you say on the 11th, that's when the swearing in will happen, right? The 11th of March.
No. The swearing in is May the 29th.
May the 29th. Okay.
In this country.
But you made mention of the 11th.
Certificate of return will be given to Bola Ahmed Tinubu as president-elect today at 11 a.m. at the National Collation Center.
Right. So May the 29th, when the swearing in is going to happen. Thank you so much, Kayla. Always refreshing interacting with you. And we'll stay with you much later when we connect to find out how things are shaping out in Nigeria. Kayla Megwa, a journalist with Channels TV in Nigeria. Well, on the back of that, we're going to be taking a break. When we return on the AM show, we'll be telling you about the Blue Skies Fresh Pact Initiative. More on that after the break. Welcome back on the AM show. And now, as promised, we're going to be telling you about the Blue Skies Fresh Pact Initiative. What is it? Now, this is an industry research and development hub created by Blue Skies to find solutions to sustainability challenges. The team has shortlisted 5 solutions with the potential to mitigate plastic pollution in Ghana. We'll be bringing you details of that as we host Dr. Dilshad Sawa. She's an associate professor, University of Northampton. We also have Alistair Jamate, Foundation and Corporate Affairs Manager at Blue Skies Ghana Limited. Lady, gentlemen, a very good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning.
I think I'll start with you, Dr. Sawa. This Fresh Pact initiative, what is it all about?
So Fresh Pact is a research and development initiative, and it's funded by the FCDO, part of the SMEP project. And
I'm sure some people will be asking, what's the FCDO?
So the FCDO is the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office that is supporting Fresh Pact.
Any additions, Alistair?
Yes, so just like Doc said, it's an initiative being championed by Blue Skies. If you look at our operations, I know Blue Skies in Ghana, we are mostly noted for fresh fruit products and fresh fruit juices. So we deal with farmers, and along the value chain, there are a lot of challenges that we have observed. And like you clearly indicated, in terms of sustainability, we are looking at how to get solution to some of the plastic pollution challenges. And so this whole idea is for us to bring people together and see how collectively we'll be able to find solutions to challenges relating to plastics in our environment, especially across the agri sector.
And we were having this discussion before we came on air. Yesterday, we have a new Hotline documentary out, A Sea of Plastic. And it feeds right into the conversation because plastic pollution is becoming a real menace. In fact, not becoming, it is a real menace. And when the rains come, then you see our drainage systems packed with plastic and then flooding also ensues. But why has Fresh Pact, this initiative, become necessary at this point?
Just like you just indicated, I think we have all been part of the problem over the years, and I think industry and policymakers need to take the responsibility of getting some of these issues addressed. And like I indicated, if you look at our operation, we process a lot of pineapples. Pineapples are grown. Previously, we used to grow pineapples on our soil. The introduction of the MD2 came with the use of plastic mulch, which is a mulch that's used to cover the ground before pineapples are planted, to provide some moisture for the fruit and also to aid its growth and then establishment in the soil. The challenge over the years is after they have harvested, some of these plastics are left in the soil. And the UN research recently, just like you showcased yesterday, has indicated that in the next 10 years, if nothing is done about plastics, we are likely to have more plastics in the soil than we have in the sea. And for us as an agribusiness, we think it is something that's of concern. So this whole idea is for us to come together. I think we have been talking for far too long. It's become very necessary now for us to put our actions into some kind of concrete stuff that will yield some benefit for the people.
But that's telling, because some fishermen nowadays go out there and they catch more plastic than fish. So if we're going to have more plastic in the soil, then how are we even going to grow our crops?
Can you imagine? And it is something that some of us probably have overlooked over the years, but as an industry player, we think that we need to work with other partners, come together, begin to find solutions. I think we have had a lot of workshops, we have had a lot of conferences, we have talked enough. What we are doing now is to bring solution providers to come together. Let's initiate an activity that will bring solution to the problems.
Dr. Sawa, speaking of those solution providers, speaking of the partners, which ones are you collaborating with? You've spoken about the FCOD, but who are your partners in this enterprise?
Okay, so we've got a list of partners, really. So we've got Blue Skies obviously leading, and then we've got Waitrose, FPC, HPW, Pima Fruit Veg, a full consortium members, and we've got University of Nottingham involved. Okay. We've got ourselves, actually, University of Northampton, doing the research and project management of the whole process.
So what exactly are these entities bringing on board? Tell us a bit more about what their contributions are. What are you bringing on board? Is it the academic expertise? What is it?
So what we're trying to do is find solutions to the problem. So we're looking at particular areas such as workwear, such as agri-mulch, and packaging. So we're looking at providing solutions that will mitigate plastic pollution from those areas.
All right, Alistair, so this is a good thing from where I sit. It is clearly going to help us in the agricultural space and even beyond. But how is this broadly going to benefit Ghanaians? What would you say in that regard?
So I think there's so much benefit that we are going to get as a people. Just like you indicated, the race are just about to start, and the possibility of us having our gutters choked and all the dangers that comes with plastic pollution in the environment will become very clear. But what we are trying to do is to engage solution providers. And we think that some of these ideas, when they are trialed and they become successful, they can be extended, and it will help. It will not just address issues relating to agriculture-based plastic pollution, but it could be extended. Currently, you go to almost every shop and you buy any item, you are given a polythene bag or something, and we collect them with a lot of zeal and alacrity, and we take them home. Sometimes you don't know what you are going to do with it. We think that when we are able to find solutions, it would also permeate down and probably create a kind of industry that will bring a lot of people together. And I'm sure once we are able to come through with a solution, it will be a great help for this country, especially in our socio-economic development.
Now, between the 27th, which is just, 2 days ago, and the 3rd of March, you have this initiative, there's a drive, and I see some £200,000 as a package somewhere. Tell us a bit about that.
So the £200,000 is, again, having solution providers. So that goes towards the research, the development, working with partners to find a solution. And it's going back to my point in terms of looking at particular areas within with Blue Skies, at workwear, packaging again, and agricultural mulch. So the solution providers are looking to provide solutions to mitigate the level of plastic being used in those key areas.
So to wrap the conversation, when is this going to be implemented? When is this going to start?
So this will be implemented within the Blue Skies operational space. We want to try these ideas. Want to find solutions to plastic mulch. So we are looking for polydoma. Want to look at the workwears that we wear. Can we get an alternative? Can they be recycled? So people have come out with a lot of ideas, and that's what the £200,000 is out for. For those ideas that will be trialed and become successful, we would have to expand the project, and that is what we are looking at. So we have already started the project. Currently, we are at the second stage of trialing the ideas that have come. And like I indicated from the beginning, we have talked for far too long. Let's put our
time for action now.
Yes.
Less talk.
Yes.
More walking of the talk.
Let's do more walking instead of talking.
Absolutely.
All right. Any final words in some 10 seconds each?
Yeah, so basically we want to thank the multimedia, especially JoyNews, and thanks for giving us such a huge platform to express this. We are having a stakeholders engagement on Friday. We are inviting all our stakeholders to come together. Let's still think through and see how we find a permanent solution to this plastic menace in our environment.
Dr. Sawa, final words?
Again, to reiterate, thank you. Thank you for giving us this platform. And yes, we're looking forward to finding solutions to the issues.
All right. And that has been Alistair Jimate, Foundation and Corporate Affairs Manager, Blue Skies. And he's also been joined by Dr. Dilshad Sawa, Associate Professor, University of Northampton. It's all about that initiative. Fresh packed, as you can see boldly in his shirt. Fresh Packed Initiative. We wish you guys all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, do stay with us. We return after the break to engage you on your thoughts on the various discussions we've had today. Our DDEP, our external debt arrangement, also the Nigerian election, and some of these other initiatives. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back on the AM show. The rest of this time, we're going to give you the opportunity to actually share your thoughts with us on the show. Yes, these also do happen sometimes. But we're offering you the opportunity of sharing your thoughts with us. Just call that number 0302 211 691. 0302 211 691. Let us know what is on your mind. We've activated the phone lines. Akonoba is our first caller. Hello?
Yeah, my brother, how are you, Ben?
I am very well. Just a little mishap here, but we're handling it very well. What are your thoughts for us?
You see, I can see some sort of dishonesty.
Dishonesty?
On the part of the finance minister, yeah. The finance minister, the electoral commissioner, and the NIA.
Okay. Where lies the dishonesty?
Wasn't this same finance minister just a couple of weeks ago who was begging Ghanaians, including my father, that he cannot pay the bondholders because they are in a dark place. There's no money. Even the bond matured and he has not been able to pay. All of a sudden, this finance minister has come and tell us that he can give NIA 1.4 billion to purchase a card or to settle the debt in order for them to get the card for election purpose. Is that not dishonest? Meanwhile, the voter register system that was used to elect the brother of Kenofrata, that same voter register is there. Nothing has happened to it. Now you are in parliament giving assurance that now there is money. Even to prove that there is money, you even made an advance payment of 100 million. Is that not dishonest? You see, I am.
But you do realize, Akonoba, that we're talking over $100 million, $117 million to be specific, and they've paid only 100 million Ghana cedis. So it's bit by bit. The finance minister said they had paid 80 million Ghana cedis previously, and now, as of yesterday, I think they had paid 20 million. So where lies the dishonesty?
My brother, finance minister said there is no money. Finance minister has not been able to pay those people whose bond matured. Is it not true or it is false? It is true.
Right.
So where did he get that 100 million?
So the point I was making, I am not disputing what you're saying, but I'm just saying that it's not 100 million that has been paid recently. What was paid yesterday was the 20 million adding to the 80 million to make it 100 million.
Yeah, so if there's no money and if the voter system there's nothing wrong with it, why do you push that money to the NIA? For election purpose? You see, I'm urging Parliament to stop delaying because you see, no law forces Parliament that Parliament should by all means accept delaying. No.
Right.
The Constitution says the EC rather. The Constitution is forcing the EC rather to take it to Parliament. So when you take it to Parliament, Parliament is not a rubber stamp. Parliament is an institution. They also have the right to vet what we are bringing.
Right.
So if Parliament decides that what we are bringing could be a recipe for chaos, they can stop the laying of it. So Parliament, stop it. Don't need these things.
Thank you, Akonoba, for sharing your thoughts with us. There will always be different opinions on that, but very valid point he makes there on that development. So how did we come up with that money to make the payments? And especially when the NIA owes so much, $117 million, and the processes have stalled. And also especially when we're tying that into the voter registration, then it creates problems. Why did we get here? We have another caller on the line. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I want to contribute to the program.
What's your name?
My name is Fifi.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Dansoman.
Fifi, go ahead.
You see, what is happening is that a lot of people don't understand what the EC went to Parliament to do. And they come on air and they assume that what the EC wants to do is to create a new register. No. The EC has taken a new CI to Parliament and is seeking to do a continuous registration exercise. So the question of they will not be able to everybody whose name is on the register will be there.
Right.
They are just making room for new entrants. Those who will be within 18 or 16 from now to 2024. That's what they are making room for. And all of a sudden, it's as if the whole thing is going to be thrown away and we don't have money and we don't. I mean,
okay, so Fifi, just hold for me. Let's have a conversation on this. I think, yes, what you're saying is right. There are some people who get the facts wrong and think that the entire register is going to be thrown away and we're starting afresh, which is not the case.
Yes.
The Ghana card is also not going to be used to vote. We'll still stick to our electoral cards. But the point to be made, Fifi, is that if you're going to, all these people turning 18, all those who are going to participate in the continuous registration, have we put in place measures? Are we certain that they will have the opportunity of getting the Ghana card? Which that is the problem. That is the problem.
Why not, my dear? Why not? You see, the thing about Ghanaians is that we always want last-minute things. The NIA tells us that there are about 600 and something thousand cards that have not been collected. You understand? If people are serious about getting the cards, they will get them.
Okay,
so it's just making excuses and just trying to throw some wheels into the spokes of the EC. That's all.
There is that group, but there are those who, and I always refer to people I know personally. There are those who have been trying for a long time to secure these cards. Some of them keep getting tossed around, go to this office, go to that office, and till now, they've not got their cards. So it's a two-way street. There are those who may just out of laziness not be getting the card, but there are those who, through genuine reasons, don't have the card.
33 million people out of the population of Ghanaians have the cards today. So there's no excuse. If you really want to get the card, I walked into, Martin Depori School. I followed the queue. It got to my turn. I went through the process. They said, when it comes, we'll let you know. I was there. I got a test. I went to take my card. You see, so we should people should just be patriotic. If you want the card, go through the process and have it. Why we're not in this country where we had of stubborn academy people? And these same stubborn academy people are now complaining that they will be disenfranchised. Who got them?
Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fifi. We have just enough time to maybe pick one or two more calls. That is, if you are minded to do so. But even before we do that, we know water is life. Awake is premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. And guess what? We have the perfect sizes for all purposes. 330, 500 ml bottles to fit your pockets and bags. 750 ml for the heavy drinkers and 1.5 liters for those who always want more. And now our 19-liter jar bottles are ideal for homes and offices. All you need to do now is drink Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. So choose a bottle of Awake Purified Drinking Water today and get quality hydration. Awake Purified Drinking Water, one for life. Remember, for every bottle you buy, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. It's another quality product by Casapreco Company Limited. For bulk purchases, just reach them on this number, 0262 351-251. This advert is FDA approved. I'm going to go on to some birthday messages now, but if you do have a call, something to say, share with us, we'll take it now. We have Abindao on the line. Hello?
Yeah, good morning, Akakpo.
Good morning. I was thinking you would actually, but anyway, what are your thoughts for us this morning?
Yeah. My thought is on the IMF.
The IMF program.
Yeah. I don't know how far it is, whether it is coming off or not.
The president says by the close of month, we should make some tracks in that regard. And of course, we're also trying to deal with our external debt.
Yes. And you see that this debt issue, you see, when the government was borrowing, we were cautioning them, it was more or less like politically motivated. But now you see that this borrowing has caused us that we can't even have easy access to IMF. So at times, whatever we talk, they shouldn't just take it as political opponents or we are tagging their government or we don't know what they are doing. We know, but at times the consequences, as you think for the shorter period, you also think for the longer period.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Abindao, thank you so much for your thoughts. Akonoba, Fifi, and Abindao. On to our birthday messages now. Happy birthday to Mr. Simon Esilfi of the GNPC from the Amponsa Kwetia and the Longdon Nyewan families. Happy birthday to you, sir. If we don't have any more callers, then I believe it's only fitting that we wrap at this point. Okay, so we have Emmanuel from Kumasi. You just made it in on the stroke of time. Emmanuel, good morning. Hello, Ima.
Hello, Mr. Kapu.
Please speak up for me, Emmanuel. Your voice is very low.
Yeah, my submission has to do with the hypocrisy of Ghanaians.
The hypocrisy of Ghanaians. Okay.
Yes.
How so?
The NIE card that they are even issuing, I can tell you, a lot of them are not working. A lot of them are not working.
When you say they are not working, what do you mean?
Yes, they will tell you the card on it is not has expired. So when they insert it on the ATM or any machine, which will detect your information or bring out your profile, they wouldn't be able to retrieve it. So they will ask you to go and do a new one. And a lot of people are holding the card, which are not working.
Are you saying when you give out, for example, your Ghana card number, the GHA whatever, because your tax identification number and all of that?
The card is most of the cards are not working. Most of the cards are just for card sake. People are holding it for just card sake. A lot of people might have friends who have gone to the bank. They wanted to use it to register, and the bank will tell them
So Emmanuel, I'm just asking you, like I started by posing, even yesterday, some entity had, need for my Ghana card. All I had to do was send them my Ghana card number. Your tax identification and all of that have been fused into that. So when you say it is not working, what do you mean? When people go to banks, they're using the Ghana card. So what do you mean? What exactly do you mean?
With the card that they take to the bank, most of the cards are not working. They said there is something, a chip on the card. If you could detect it, there is a chip on it. And they said when it is scratched, then it becomes waste. That means you can't use it for any automated processes.
When it is scratched, is that what you're saying?
Yes. And a lot of people.
But of course, if the chip, like any chip, if there are scratches on the chip or if it is mishandled in any way, then of course you may not be able to read the information because these are machines reading the information. Then you may have to do it again. But that is not unique to the Ghana
card. And you have to do it again. And we have a lot of people in this country whose cards have been scratched and it's not working. Even they can't even register even their SIM card. Are you getting my point? They are not able to register it even with their SIM card. They will go to the area.
But Emmanuel, even if your card is scratched, right? You're still going. It's still, for example, let's say you have a number, okay?
Yes.
This is your Ghana card number. your details are there. Even if it is scratched or there is some interface that has been affected, all you have to do is go to the NIA and you'll get a replacement with the same details,
and that
right?
will take you a donkey years to have it.
Okay,
it
so I would understand
you.
I would understand you if you talk about the time gap. Maybe if you go back and try to get it. So that's what you're talking about.
The scenario I want to give here is that although people have registered, we can even check from the NIA database and say maybe we have 10 million people who have registered. But if you check, almost maybe 1 million of people cards are not working, and they have to replace it. So it's like they don't even have it at all.
All right, Emmanuel, that's an interesting point you've made there, and maybe I mean I was just trying to get a full understanding of what he was trying to say. But if he talks about replacement and then the time lapse or the time gap in getting your card back, then that could be problematic. But thank you so much for having joined us this Wednesday morning on the AM show. I've been the lone man standing in the course of the show, and it's been good coming your way. Let's do this again, same time tomorrow. Don't you forget, maybe you've seen me not in my usual suit or anything, but in the course of this month, Ghana month, you're going to see us in our African prints. And in fact, the gentleman who's coming up next on JoyNews desk, Samuel Kojo Brace, is decked in some wonderful batakari, or is it fugu? Stay tuned. JoyNews desk up next.